Merry Christmas. Yes, I know, I'm a bit late to the party, but whatever. As a late Christmas present and in celebration of my channel nearing its 1-year anniversary, I have constructed this behemoth of a video exploring all of my absolute craziest Jujutsu Kaisen theories and extended lore fanficky content. My channel was pretty much built on Jujutsu Kaisen theories, so there's definitely a lot to get through. Obviously, a lot of them never came true. Okay, most of them, but all of them are hella interesting and absolutely bonkers crazy. I mean, hell, some of them are even better than what JJK actually gave us. So, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now just sit back, relax, and let's get straight into the craziest Jujutsu Kaisen theories you've ever seen. Enjoy! This is easily the most fun, creative, and outright insane JJK theory I have ever constructed. And yes, I am well aware that I say that every single time, but this time it's different. At first, I thought this theory was just fun, but not realistic, until I actually connected all of the dots and realized that Gege genuinely foreshadowed JJK's ending right at the beginning of the story. Or more specifically, I believe that Satoru Gojo actually predicted Jujutsu Kaisen's ending all the way back in chapter 32. Now please trust the process, because I guarantee that this will blow your mind once you hear my full theory and reasoning behind this. But everything is based on this moment right here.
And in the end, it'll even solve global warming.
At the time, it just seemed like one of many dumb Gojo moments. But after reading the Culling Games and the current events of JJK, I came to the realization that this random dumb Gojo moment isn't actually random at all. It's way too specific to be random, and it's also closely related to one of JJK's biggest plot points. Actually, that's a massive understatement. It's scarily close to one of JJK's biggest plot points. And yeah, I realize that I must sound like a total crazy person right now, so how about I cut the yap and dive straight into the theory? Alright then, first things first, cursed energy sucks ass. I'm sorry, but there's really no sugarcoating this, but cursed energy is the real villain of Jujutsu Kaisen, and it needs to go. One of the biggest parts of JJK's story is all about ridding curses from the world. We've seen many big characters whose whole thing is about changing the state of cursed energy. Geto wanted to solve the problem by creating a world full of sorcerers who can control it. Yuki wanted to create a world where cursed energy is eradicated completely, and on the other side of the scale, you have Kenjaku, who supposedly wants to optimize cursed energy, but who really knows what his true intentions are, because he's a slimy, greasy, lying liar of lies. And then there is Tengen, who most definitely has a hidden agenda, but fuck Tengen, who cares? Sorry, I've got a lot of pent-up aggression towards Kenny and Tengen for the whole Yuki thing, but I'll try and stay on topic, okay? My bad. The point is, the theme of removing cursed energy, and cursed energy being the cause of all their problems, has been a key part of Jujutsu Kaisen from day one. I mean, hell, even the idea of Toji escaping cursed energy and earning his freedom from both the Zenin and the Chains of Fate are heavily tied to this theme. I genuinely don't see an ending where cursed energy isn't removed for good because of how prevalent Gege made that very theme. However, I can admit that just a handful of characters whose story is based on freeing the world from curses doesn't necessarily mean that that has to happen in order for us to get a satisfactory ending. The real reason I think cursed energy absolutely needs to go is all thanks to Kenjaku, and that's where shit gets really crazy. Honestly, you guys would be so surprised how many people skip the Culling Games and start reading Gojo vs Sukuna. And even for those of you who do read the whole manga, this specific development is easily forgotten and lost among the Culling Games' badass fights. So let me remind you that one of the most important developments occur in chapter 201 when Kenjaku and Arame take a leisurely vacation to the White House. How the fuck Arame is meeting the US president before Hakari fights Sukuna, I just don't know. Anyway, following the Shibuya incident, cursed energy and sorcery became public knowledge, so Kenjaku used that to his advantage. He manipulated the US into sending military forces into the Culling Games in order to boost the amount of killing and the total cursed energy collected for the merger to work. And how is it that Kenjaku managed to trick the almighty nation of America into doing this? Well, he appealed to their biggest weakness, energy. He informed them that cursed energy is potentially the cleanest source of renewable energy in the world. Supposedly, one Jujutsu sorcerer could power an entire city, and a sorcerer like Gojo could power a nation. Of course, the US ate that information up, but naturally their main concern was about getting their hands on this energy source before other superpower nations like Russia could. And even though the soldiers sent in were completely massacred, it doesn't change the fact that Kenjaku let the cat out the bag. Even if Sukuna is defeated, we are still left with a massive problem, because the world is now aware of cursed energy and its potential as as the most efficient energy source ever. Simply put, if cursed energy remains in play, then it would likely lead to World War III as nations fight for control over cursed energy. It's such an easy detail to miss, but it has huge implications for JJK's conclusion. Now, the threat of World War III, the threat of Japanese people being captured to be used as energy sources, and the importance of Geto, Yuki, and Toji's story combined are the reason that I think cursed energy needs to go. Now, as interesting as all of that is, I'm sure some of you are wondering what the hell this has got to do with Gojo's childish outburst in chapter 32. But on the other hand, I'm sure that some of you are starting to clock on to what I'm getting at, but I'm gonna explain it anyway. Let's pretend for a second that the world did manage to utilize cursed energy to power the planet. It would quite literally solve global warming. Fossil fuels, nuclear plants, and even current sustainable energy sources can be completely dropped in exchange for cursed energy. And surely now you get my point about Gojo's global warming claim being way too specific. He literally says, and in the end, it will even solve global warming. I know he's goofy old Gojo, but how do you go from revealing that Yuji is alive to a conclusion as drastic as solving global warming? It's just too random. No one even questioned it because it does match Gojo's character to be goofy like that, and it's very early on in the manga. But ever since kenjaku introduced this idea of solving global warming with cursed energy, I haven't been able to get this moment out of my mind. I genuinely think that Gojo might have accidentally predicted Jujutsu Kaisen's conclusion, but obviously it begs the question of how the fuck do we even get rid of cursed energy and use it to solve global warming at the same time? Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't have all the specifics of how this would happen because, surprise surprise, I am not Gege Akutami. However, I do have some incredibly solid general guesses at how this long foreshadowed conclusion can actually occur. As I said, cursed energy almost definitely needs to go before the end of the story, or else the entire world just goes into chaos. Since kenjaku is the one who both started this merger plan and made the world aware of cursed energy's potential, it makes me think that the merger is actually the key to everything. Kenjaku is also very closely tied to both Geto and Yuki, the two characters who best represent the theme of eradicating curses. Now, despite what many people think, we have absolutely no idea how the merger will come into play, we have no idea what role it will play, and we don't even have a f***ing clue what it will look like. Hell, even kenjaku has no clue what it will look like. Lots of people have just decided that it will simply be a big final villain monster thing for them to fight. I'll get into this point more later, but long story short, no, there's no real evidence for this, we have no clue what's gonna happen. In terms of this theory though, I believe the merger could potentially be the perfect tool for killing two birds with one stone. Again, the specifics are blurry, but it could be used as a tool to remove cursed energy from the people of Japan, or at least be a way to stop it pooling and creating more curses. And then it could also serve as a massive source of cursed energy in order to power the world and solve global warming. Maybe they will find a way to contain the merger's power and make all future cursed energy flow into the merger instead of pooling randomly to create curses. Huh, if only we had a way of creating something capable of holding that sort of power. Oh wait, didn't the very same person who started this whole merger plan also create Yuji Itadori to be the perfect vessel? And isn't a huge part of Yuji's character also about taking on other people's share of suffering in order to save more lives? Yeah, this already makes a scary amount of sense, but somehow it doesn't stop there. Now, I want you to think back to Gojo making that comment on global warming in chapter 32. What was the context of that conversation? Well, it was Yuji and Gojo talking about how they were going to tell the other students that Yuji was actually alive and not dead. What Gojo said was that in the end, Yuji's revival will eventually lead to global warming being solved. If Yuji goes on to be a vessel for the merger and use it to power the world, then Gojo's goofy-ass prediction literally becomes reality. But wait, because it gets even crazier. In that very same global warming statement, Gojo also says, and I quote, "I bet somebody will even throw up." Again, this is very easily passed off as a random goofy-ass Gojo moment, but in reality, it's actually evidence that strongly supports this entire theory. And why is that the case? Well, because in chapter 263, Gege dedicates an entire page to Sukuna throwing up his fingers as a direct result of Yuji Itadori's attack.
Coincidence? I think not!
This whole theory is already happening in the story right now. The conclusion has already started. We are already being shown the signs and no one is clocking onto it. All I'm gonna say is make sure that in the coming chapters, you watch out for any of the Jujutsu High students starting to cry out of happiness. Because alongside solving global warming and someone throwing up, the first and second years crying of happiness at Yuji's revival was one of the things that Gojo predicted. So if we see one of those things happen anytime soon, like we did with Sukuna throwing up, then it means that I'm on the right track. that, so keep an eye out. Anyway, Yuji forging that pact with Sukuna to bring him back to life all the way back in the beginning of the manga is the literal reason that we are in our current situation. Gege literally used Gojo to foreshadow the ending from the very beginning of the story. Gojo quite literally predicts that Yuji being revived will lead to someone throwing up and eventually solve global warming. And Yuji will do that by completing his purpose of being the perfect vessel for the merger. He will then take on all of the suffering and cursed energy of the Japanese people and then use it to save the world from global warming, hence preventing World War III. This would not only make Gojo's random ass prediction come true, but it would also resolve the long-running theme of eradicating the threat of curses and cursed energy. It just makes so much sense. It is literally perfect, and if I am right, then holy shit, Gege, you are a genius. Honestly, I really hope you guys made it this far into the video because I have never felt so certain of a theory in my life. It feels like I have actually spoiled Jujutsu Kaisen's ending for myself, but who knows, maybe I just got lost in the source. Okay, now that I have finally shared this theory in its entirety, I want to quickly address some counterpoints I'm sure that people will try and make. Now, for some reason, lots of people have just decided that the merger will be this big final boss that they all have to fight. But there is literally no evidence for this, along with there being no real narrative reason, considering that Sukuna is already an impossibly strong final boss. Compared to the evidence I have collected for this theory, no other option really has any backing to it. And remember, just because you don't like something doesn't mean that Gege won't do it. He doesn't really care what we want, he just wants to write the story that he set out to tell, and I respect him massively for it. I'm aware that the same logic applies to what I think, but I don't tend to complain about much, so it's fine. I'm not gonna deny though, I could just be dead wrong, and that's okay. Still, I think most people will definitely love this theory and share my vision. At the end of the day though, we are just gonna have to wait and see. Also, to be clear, no, I don't think this is gonna overshadow anything to do with Sukuna and Yuji. Sukuna and Yuji, and Sukuna in general, is just a completely separate story. What I'm talking about now is the final conclusion that wraps up the overarching theme of cursed energy being the major problem. This isn't really going to predict anything that's happening with Sukuna, it's just about the actual ending, like the ending. Also, I do apologize if this video was a bit complex or hard to follow, but I did my best to make sure that it was as structured and simple as possible. I just kept getting new ideas and my head got real messy while writing this, but I do think I included everything that I wanted to say. Hopefully it comes across as a lot easier to understand once it's been edited and fine-tuned. I really love this theory and I think it's easily my best work, so I really hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. Alright then, I'm gonna try and keep this intro as short as possible because today we have so much cool stuff to get through. But I'm sure you're pretty confused right now, so I'll give you a very quick rundown of the situation. Simply put, I am currently in possession of the Heian era flashbacks. As you have probably figured out by now though, they are not official chapters written by Gege. It's very clear that we are not getting Heian era flashbacks anytime soon, or ever. So I got bored of waiting and decided to write them myself. Now this video will hopefully be the first part of a series, so I haven't written the entire Heian era, only the bits that people want to see the most. This video will cover Sukuna's birth and childhood, how Sukuna met Arame, how Kenjaku got the soul of Sukuna's twin, and finally how Kenjaku convinced Sukuna to take part in the culling games. This video has been in the making for a long time, and I go into great depth with each of these stories, as well as making sure to stay on theme and keep everybody in character. This genuinely may be the closest thing we ever get to a Heian era flashback, so I think you guys will really enjoy it. Hi, just a quick interjection from the real me, or current me, whatever. Fun fact, I actually wrote how Arame met Sukuna, and then Gege dropped that a few days ago, and it's pretty much exactly the same. I kind of expand on it a bit more, but the premise is very similar, which I found really cool. Anyway, back to the video. To begin our journey, allow me to take you all the way back to the Nara era, which is actually before the Heian era. It was around the year 750 when the immortal sorceress Tengen, creator of Japan's pure barriers, had fallen pregnant. And yes, you can probably see where I'm going with this, and some of you may not like the sound of it, but please just trust the process because I think I have cooked. Anyway, Tengen had fallen pregnant with twins, however, she was completely unaware of this fact for a very long time. And the reason for this is all due to the nature of her immortality technique. From the moment the twins were conceived, they were subject to the effects of Tengen's immortality technique due to still being a physical part of her. Similar to how Jujutsu considers twins one and the same, it also views a fetus and a mother in much the same way. As a result, the physical development of the twins was slowed massively, and the pregnancy was prolonged far beyond the normal 9 months. In fact, this pregnancy lasted around 223 years, and Tengen only became aware of it part of the way through the Heian era. Over those 2 long centuries, the twins twins were very slowly growing, as well as being constantly shrouded in Tengen's own cursed energy. Similar to how Yuji Itadori soaked up Sukuna's cursed energy from being his vessel, the twins had gained an immense amount of cursed energy each over the years. Now, even though Tengen's immortality technique affected them, the effects of Tengen's assimilation with star plasma vessels did not. And this of course meant that as they slowly grew, the twins also slowly started evolving into something stuck between a human and a curse. In addition to this, the longer the pregnancy went on, the more deprived of sustenance the twins became, which was obviously not helped by Tengen's own ignorance of the fact that she was pregnant. And just as Sukuna says in chapter 257, he ended up devouring the other twin in the womb in order to survive. And it was then that Tengen learned she was pregnant. Tengen knew that if someone of her position was found carrying this curse of a child, then both herself and the child would face terrifying consequences. So once Tengen had worked out exactly why and how this 200-year pregnancy had occurred, she turned to the only person that she thought would maybe be able to help her. She turned to her brother, also known as Kenjaku. And yes, I have decided that Tengen and Kenjaku were siblings because not only are they old friends from the same era, but they both have very similar techniques that are centered around prolonging the user's life, so I just thought it made sense. Anyway, Tengen told Kenjaku everything and asked for his help in delivering the child. Kenjaku agreed, and through a combination of complex barrier techniques designed to separate the child from the effects of Tengen's immortality, the child was born. And simply put, it was just an abomination, with 4 arms, 2 mouths, and 2 faces, which were a result of consuming his twin and evolving into a part human, part cursed monster. Naturally, Kenjaku was intrigued by this new specimen, but made sure not to betray any sense of excitement while Tengen was present. Tengen knew that the child could not stay with her for both of their safety, so she forced Kenjaku into a binding vow. Tengen told Kenjaku that he must take the child deep into the Hida Mountains, far away from Jujutsu headquarters, and then stay with him until he can fend for himself. Of course, she also ensured that Kenjaku would never speak a word of this to anyone. In exchange for fulfilling these requirements, Kenjaku then had a request of his own, which would make up his part of the binding vow. He requested to be given the soul of the other twin that Tengen had sealed within a complex barrier following labor, to which Tengen agreed. Just before leaving for the Hida Mountains though, Tengen stopped Kenjaku in order to say one final thing before shutting herself off from the world for good. She told Kenjaku that she wanted the boy to be named Yuji, meaning brave. Kenjaku simply said nothing and then left with the monster child in his arms. He saw this child as nothing more than a step towards fulfilling his curiosity, and in Kenjaku's twisted mind, the name Yuji really did not fit this kid at all. So once reaching the caves buried deep within the Hida Mountains, he settled on the name Ryomen Sukuna, the two-faced spirit. Kenjaku actually brought Sukuna to the very same cave that we see his original body mummified in during chapter 220. Even without the binding vow he made with Tengen though, Kenjaku would have ensured Sukuna's survival anyway, simply because of his own burning curiosity and the massive potential that he saw in this child. So Kenjaku made sure that the baby was fed and kept safe for around 2 years until he was able to move around by himself. Kenjaku knew that even if infant Sukuna was somehow able to remember him, by the time Sukuna grew up, Kenjaku would have already taken a new body. Despite taking this precaution though, after around 2 years, Kenjaku made sure to keep his distance and quietly watched over and protected Sukuna until he was able to fend for himself. At the age of 4, Sukuna began wandering outside the safety of his cave, and Kenjaku watched from afar as the child mercilessly hunted down deer and foxes with his newly awakened technique, known to us as Shrine. It was at this point that Kenjaku was certain Sukuna could sustain himself, so he left without a trace in full confidence that they would one day meet again. And so, a 4-year-old king of curses who knew absolutely nothing other than the isolation of his cave spent his days hunting and eating anything that moved, and yet his ever-growing appetite never quite seemed to be satisfied. As the 4-armed toddler went about his days hunting and feasting, he was completely unaware that just a few miles down the mountain, there was a little village. This snowy mountain village was inhabited by a small and peaceful community, a lot of whom were actually sorcerers. Now, the strongest and most respected warriors of the village all prided themselves on their fire-based curse techniques, which were perfect for combating the cold and defending the occupants from bears and other threats. One day, one of the main sorcerer families in the village who passed down this flame technique actually birthed a a child with frosty white hair, and they named this child Urame, the Frozen Star. At 4 years old, Urame awakened their ice-based curse technique when they accidentally froze over the village well. Now, since birth, the occupants of the village felt very uneasy around Urame, and their suspicions were confirmed when seeing their overwhelmingly strong ice powers. This ice technique was seen as a curse and a bad omen by the villagers, which led to Arame's parents keeping them locked inside for most of their days. When Urame was only 6 years old, they had a nightmare and woke up to find their sister half frozen to death next to them. Their sister survived, but Urame only became more and more neglected by their own family and began suppressing their technique for fear of accidentally hurting more people. 4 years later, when Urame was 10 years old, the dam suppressing their powers finally burst. The constant abuse and neglect caused an overwhelming feeling of isolation and hatred to build up, and it eventually led to an outburst in which Urame accidentally killed both of their parents and their sister. As a result, the flame-wielding warriors of the village called for Arame's execution and began a hunt for the child who had fled into the mountains right after the incident. Cold, scared, and lonely, Urame ran for their life in the depths of the snowy Hida mountain forest, and that was when Urame stumbled across something very peculiar. Once Urame was sure that the hunters had lost their trail, they settled down next to a mountain stream to drink when suddenly they felt an overwhelming presence behind them. On instinct, Urame reacted by completely encapsulating the strange four-armed creature in ice. However, it merely took Sukuna a few seconds to completely melt the ice using the raw form of his furnace technique. It was the first time that anybody had ever walked away unscathed from the full power of Urame's ice, which obviously left them totally baffled. Before they had time to react, Sukuna knocked Urame out before dragging them back to his cave and dumping their unconscious body on a pile of old bones. After a few hours, Urame woke up, but instead of panicking, they simply remained as still as possible and observed the now 14-year-old Sukuna, who was eating raw deer meat next to his makeshift campfire. Despite the dangerous situation they were in, Urame could not help but feel an intense admiration for this creature. He was the first person Urame had ever met who was overwhelmingly stronger than themselves. Someone that Urame would never have to worry about accidentally hurting. Someone who had clearly experienced the same isolation for many years. Urame had also noticed that Sukuna had not seemed to figure out that he can actually cook his food on the fire. So when Sukuna went out hunting again later that day, Urame decided to cook the remaining scraps of deer meat instead of just taking their chance to escape. When Sukuna returned, he seemed totally unconcerned that Urame was sitting by his fire. He was a curious being who had no memories whatsoever of encountering another human before, let alone another sorcerer, so Urame simply handed him the cooked meat and Sukuna ate. Despite speaking no Japanese, Sukuna was smart enough to understand that the pleasure gained from Urame's cooking was not worth killing and eating them. Urame too understood, and with nowhere else to go, they chose to join Sukuna in his life of hunting, eating, and now cooking. Urame also understood that no matter how much they admired Sukuna's strength, Sukuna did not care for Urame for any reason other than their usefulness. But for Urame, that was good enough, and so for 2 more years, they remained living up in that same cave in the Hida Mountains until one day everything changed. When out hunting downstream, as Urame normally does, they were ambushed and captured by the elite warriors of their village. Before Urame had any chance to fight back though, a now 16-year-old Ryomen Sukuna jumped from a mountain ledge and crushed 2 of the warriors under his weight alone. The others drew their flame-coated swords, but Sukuna was levels faster and delivered fatal slices to most of the remaining sorcerers. There was one though, the village captain, who had managed to land a powerful blast of flames on Ryomen Sukuna. Sukuna looked at his burnt hand, which had blocked the flame, and he simply smiled. This was his first ever fight with trained sorcerers, and it brought him closer to satisfying his immense appetite than anything had ever done before. Once all the warriors were cut to pieces, Sukuna, who had learned Japanese over the last 2 years, commanded that Urame was to cook them. Urame obeyed, and so the King of Curses had developed a new desire for human flesh and the thrill of fighting with Jujutsu. Unable to go back to simply hunting animals, Urame and Sukuna finally left their cave behind and made for Urame's old village. And that's where they slaughtered the entire village, and Urame then made a feast from all of their remains. Brutal, I know, but this is Sukuna we're talking about, remember? After only a few days spent in the village though, a troop of sorcerers with a very powerful presence actually arrived to confront them. The sorcerers said they were one of the Fujiwara's squads that were sent by a higher-up called the Teller in order to investigate the village and purge it of this curse. The sorcerers were significantly stronger and faster than the village warriors, and many did land blows on the young Sukuna, but eventually they were all slain by the King of Curses. Once Sukuna had his fun with them, he commanded Arame to salvage the horse-drawn cart that they arrived in, and then follow their residuals back to where they came from. So this pair of monsters left the mountains behind and headed for civilization, where they would seek out the strong and weak alike in order to further satisfy Sukuna's monstrous appetite. Over many years, Sukuna gained a countrywide reputation and secured himself the title of the King of Curses. And yes, I am skipping over these events with a time skip because, like I said, I am only covering specific plot points. I deliberately left the time in between alone so that I can make another part because this video is going to be long enough already. Anyway, moving on to the really cool bit. So as the King of Curses went around building his reputation as the strongest sorcerer in history, the most evil sorcerer in history, known to us as Kenjaku, started putting his plan in motion from the shadows. After a long time carefully studying the soul of Sukuna's twin, Kenjaku managed to apply his barrier techniques and learn how to split the soul of a sorcerer and then seal it within a cursed object. After seeing how Sukuna evolved into a part cursed monster, Kenjaku was also curious what someone like Tengen would be like if she was allowed to fully evolve. And from Kenjaku's curiosity came an exciting new idea that he would come to call the Culling Games. Kenjaku's plan was very simple: locate the strongest sorcerers throughout history and then convince them to become a cursed object after death in order to be reincarnated many years in the future to take part in this so-called Culling Games. The concept of Sukuna's evolution into a part cursed, part human also inspired an idea in which Kenjaku wondered what would happen if a human and a curse mixed DNA, but he also decided that he shouldn't take on too much at once and he should worry about that plan another time. Since Kenjaku was sure that most sorcerers would agree to the terms, he was faced with only one real issue. How would he make sure to locate all of these strong sorcerers over the years to come? Well, after some careful planning, Kenjaku devised a solution to his dilemma. He had heard tales of a Fujiwara clan higher-up called the Teller, who had the ability to read the flow of cursed energy through time. The Fujiwara clan used this Teller to predict and locate potential new threats and cursed spirits before they happen, hence why the Fujiwara sorcerers knew to journey to the Hida Mountains. If Kenjaku could secure this sorcerer's body, he would be able to study the flow of cursed energy over the next 1,000 years and make note of all the times and locations where strong fluctuations occur. Kenjaku began his plan by putting steps in play to draw out and divide the Fujiwara's main fighting forces so that he could simply slip in and take the teller's body without needing to fight. He first decided to approach a young sorcerer called Yorozu and easily convinced her to become a cursed object after death. In exchange for this, Yorozu agreed to draw out and challenge one of the Fujiwara's main squads, known as the Five Void Generals. Around the same time, Kenjaku also orchestrated a mutiny within the Fujiwara's Sun, Moon, and Star squad. In secret, he ambushed and took the body of a sorcerer in the squad, and then turned on the other sorcerers by mercilessly slaughtering them. Kenjaku then used the squad's captain, Takaka Uro, as a scapegoat and ensured their execution. After once again changing bodies to avoid suspicion, Kenjaku approached the unsuspecting Uro with his reincarnation proposition, to which Uro obviously agreed. With Yorozu drawing out the Five Void Generals and the Sun, Moon, and Stars squad in complete disarray, Kenjaku took his chance to slip into Fujiwara headquarters and steal the body of this so-called Teller. Once he had slipped back into the shadows, Kenjaku then spent his years fine-tuning the technique and recording the flow of cursed energy through time. Despite observing a disappointing drop in average cursed energy after the Heian era, Kenjaku did detect multiple interesting fluctuations years in the future, with an especially interesting one occurring in around 600 years. What sealed the deal for Kenjaku, though, was an overwhelming shift in cursed energy detected roughly 1,000 years in the future. So, once Kenjaku had collected all of the information he needed, it was finally time for him to approach the King of Curses with his Culling Games proposition. When approached, Sukuna immediately took an interest in this mysterious man who claimed to be called Kenjaku. He could tell that Kenjaku was an immensely strong and skilled sorcerer, and yet his presence gave off no sense of hostility. Kenjaku decided honesty would be the best policy with Sukuna, so he told him about his body-swapping curse technique and his proposal of Sukuna becoming a cursed object after death. As Kenjaku expected, Sukuna's initial reaction to the Culling Games plan was one of boredom and of caution. Sukuna was wary to agree and was unsure what Kenjaku really had had planned for the pieces of his soul that Kenjaku would obtain should Sukuna agree. The idea of being reincarnated again to fight sorcerers who are underwhelmingly weaker than him also seemed incredibly uninteresting to Sukuna. He then asked Kenjaku why someone as blatantly skilled as he was would take such a weak body. He also questioned what Kenjaku had to gain from the culling games as a whole. Kenjaku simply replied, saying that he was a curious observer wishing to push the limits of cursed energy, which was at least partly true. Kenjaku then revealed his final trump card and told Sukuna all about why his current body was so weak and about the foresight ability that it possessed. What Kenjaku said next is what sealed the deal for Sukuna and convinced him to agree to Kenjaku's terms. Kenjaku revealed to Sukuna a prophecy which he had come across while looking into the future of cursed energy. He had no details about their name, technique, or appearance, but all Kenjaku knew for sure was that in 1,000 years, there will be one born blessed enough to oppose even the king of curses. A single sorcerer sent from heaven to earth that would shift the balance of the world forever. It was this prophecy from Kenjaku that turned Sukuna's caution and boredom into one of pure excitement. Even if it meant risking his soul in Kenjaku's hands, it was worth it for a chance to face the only sorcerer in 1,000 years who could possibly oppose him. Once the binding vow was made with Sukuna and Arame, Kenjaku then withdrew and allowed the rest of the Heian era to pass him by. In the year 1085, at the age of 112, which is the same chapter that Sukuna awakened in Shibuya, Ryoma and Sukuna passed away and Kenjaku returned to claim his fingers as well as his mummified corpse. He kept some fingers for himself and then scattered the rest throughout Japan. Kenjaku then placed Sukuna's corpse in the very same cave that he brought Sukuna to as a baby up in the Hida Mountains. 100 years after Sukuna's death, in the year 1185, the Heian era ended and the golden age of Jujutsu came to a close. Kenjaku, satisfied with his achievements, then started his 1,000-year-long voyage throughout history. Once his long journey was finally reaching its finale though, Kenjaku put another plan in place to create a vessel capable of holding the deadly Ryomen Sukuna. Kenjaku turned the soul of Sukuna's twin into a cursed object, and then fed it to the unsuspecting husband of a woman whose body Kenjaku soon took for himself. Kenjaku then fell pregnant with their child and fed the baby one of Ryomen Sukuna's still sealed fingers. Holding the baby, Kenjaku deliberated on a name. Kenjaku then thought all the way back to that fateful day when Tengen handed him her cursed child and the final request that Tengen made. So Kenjaku looked at the child in his arms now and decided on the name Yuji. And well, you know the rest. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. I think this might be the craziest and most interesting theory I have ever made. In fact, it's so much more than just a normal theory because I've pretty much written 2 whole potential stories that Gege hasn't fully explored yet. And both of these theories or stories are about the same topic, but one is from the Heian era and one is from the Edo period 400 years ago. So if you like Yuta Okotsu, insane theories, and information about Jujutsu's history, then this is definitely the video for you. Anyway, I decided to go deep down the Yuta Okotsu rabbit hole and attempt to dig up the potentially very dark secret of his heritage. With chapter 261, there's no doubt that all the Sugawara and Fujiwara stuff is going to be very important very soon, so I thought it was finally time to address it. And despite how crazy of a claim it may seem, the thumbnail is actually not clickbait at all. I will genuinely be starting off this video with an amazing theory about why Okotsu is a secret Gojo Zenin hybrid. So let's get started. So the main idea behind this theory is that the Zenin clan actually descends from the Fujiwara clan in the same way that the Gojo clan descends from the Sugawara clan. And yes, the Gojo clan did come from the Sugawara clan because Gojo outright says it. And in the canon light novels, Gojo also confirms that Sugawara Michizane was a 6-eyes limitless user, so there's that too. But why do I think the Zenin would descend from the Fujiwara clan? Well, first off, the Fujiwara clan is probably the clan that Gege makes the biggest deal out of in terms of who was prevalent in the Heian era. And similarly, the Zenin is, or at least was, one of the most important clans of today, but we have never once heard the name Zenin in the context of the Heian era. And I know, it's not much to go on at all, but you're a blithering idiot if you think that's all I've got. The real evidence lies with one very powerful individual from the Heian era, better known as Yorozu. After single-handedly defeating one of the Fujiwara's elite squads, the clan actually acknowledged Yorozu and supposedly took her in. So an obvious similarity of the Zenin and Fujiwara clans is that they love strong techniques and often take in strong sorcerers in order to increase their pool of future inherited techniques. And because of what we know from Jujutsu so far, the only time 2 people can have an identical technique is when it's genetically inherited. Now, Yorozu's curse technique is construction, a very broken curse technique that would have taken us all by surprise if it wasn't for the fact that we have actually already seen it with Mai Zenin. They literally have identical techniques, which heavily supports my theory that the Fujiwara clan became the Zenin because it would mean that she actually inherited it from Yorozu's bloodline. Not to mention the fact that Mai and Yorozu actually look very similar. And this is my main supporting evidence for this theory, and honestly I think I make a very strong and convincing argument, because how else do you explain a Zenin inheriting the exact same curse technique as Yorozu? And despite stupid dumbass belief, Gege is a great writer who would not make a decision like that for no reason at all. Since it's heavily implied that Yuta descends from both the Sugawara clan and the Fujiwara clan, it would not only make him a Zenin, but also a Gojo Zenin combo. As Gojo rightfully points out in chapter 261 though, the Sugawara and Fujiwara clans did not get along, so why would they be related to both? We also know the Gojo and Zenin had beef just like the Sugawara clan and Fujiwara clan had beef, so that's more evidence. Now I'll be completely honest with you guys, as much as I find the Zenin idea really cool, I'm not 100% sure what it would actually mean for Yuta. In 261, Gojo suggests that being born of both clans means that Yuta could potentially have been born even more blessed than he was, so there's that, I guess. And of course, when Gojo says blessed, he means in Jujutsu, but when Yuta says it, he means his friends, which is just another cute little parallel for you guys. Anyway, despite it meaning he could be like hella crazy strong, I'm not sure how to really take this information should it be true. However, it does actually serve some use in knowing, because it actually allowed for the birth of an incredible theory on how Yuta actually came to be and what caused the Gojo Zenin clan beef. So, keeping the assumption that Yuta is a Zenin, let's move on to an even better theory. Now, big shout out to a viewer of mine called Vara for actually bringing this theory to my attention. I'll leave their Discord below in case any of you want to go chat with him about it, but it is really interesting. Anyway, as Gojo told us, the height of the conflict between the Gojo and Zenin clans was actually 400 years ago in the Edo period, and this is when the Gojo and Zenin clan heads battled it out. And that was the battle where the Zenin head summoned Maharaga, who obviously then took it upon himself to put them both 6 feet under. The theory is very flexible on minor details, but the idea is that one of the two clan heads actually had a love affair with a close relative of the other clan head. Obviously, the clans already had beef, so one clan knocking up a close relative of the other clan head would definitely explain why that battle happened. And the idea is that for the secret child's protection, they were sent into hiding and given a new name of a Kotsu. Assuming the Zenin do descend from the Fujiwara clan, this theory would actually explain why Yuta would be related to both the Sugawara and Fujiwara clans. It would also explain why he's so strong, and even why Satoru Gojo didn't recognize his name. The story would also perfectly reflect Yuta's character and experience in the manga so far. I mean, he grew up heavily isolated due to being haunted by the literal curse of love. If the Gojo Zenin affair was a story of them being in forbidden love, then it would be very fitting for Yuta's character. And as a result of that love, the child would then be forced into an isolated life of hiding in order to protect themselves. However, there would still be records hidden somewhere due to Ijichi's ability to be able to dig them up and tell Gojo that Yuta was actually related to Sugawara Michizane. And since Ijichi only found a relation to Sugawara, it's likely that the Gojo clan was the one to send them into hiding and then doctor the records to hide any evidence of an affair with the Zenin. I don't know about you, but I think Vara and I cooked so hard with this theory. I genuinely love it, and I wish Gege would write more stuff like this. I mean, I'm sure he's going to, don't worry, but you know. Now, honestly, knowing you lot, a bunch of people will disagree with Yuta being a Zenin and then completely discredit this entire theory. Well, joke's on you, because I actually have an alternate theory which is just as good but doesn't rely on Yuta being a Zenin for it to work. So now you can all drop the Zenin assumption and only focus on the Sugawara and Fujiwara side of things as we travel all the way back to the Heian era. It was actually a Heian era sorcerer called Uro that concluded Yuta is a Fujiwara descendant. She was the leader of one of the Fujiwara's elite celestial squads, but she was betrayed by a fellow Fujiwara sorcerer. She refers to this sorcerer only as him and says that he killed his own people before blaming it on Uro, resulting in her execution and newfound hatred towards the Fujiwara clan. During their fight, Uro actually senses something familiar about Yuta, and after hearing what he had to say, she angrily concluded that he is a Fujiwara. What Yuta was saying is actually very suggestive too. He was questioning Uro about why she immediately went about killing and trying to make a name for themselves when they have been given a second chance at life. And the part that makes Uro snap though is when Yuta asks if she has any friends or family, and saying that he doesn't understand why you would put so much effort into something just for your own gain. It was that last statement that actually triggered a brief flashback and the conclusion that Yuta is a Fujiwara. And that flashback shows a man who I'm guessing is the one who betrayed her all the way back in the Heian era. Now, why would Yuta's talk for having others to fight for remind Uro of a man who betrayed his own people and killed Uro? Well, my theory is actually much like the last. I believe this particular Fujiwara sorcerer had a forbidden love affair with a Sugawara, resulting in the birth of a line that would later become a Kotsu. Knowing Heian era sorcerers and clans, clans, it's very likely that they adopt the traditional and selfish mindset that we often see from monsters like Arame, Sukuna, and Yorozu. When his people discovered the affair though, he would appeal to them in the same way that Yuta is doing with Uro. However, it would have no effect, so he had to kill them all and use Uro as a scapegoat in order to protect the secret of his family. And again, this theory perfectly reflects Yuta because like that sorcerer, Yuta will go to any lengths to protect his family. He will even become a monster and kill, but only after trying the reasonable approach first. Actually, in that regard, Yuta is a very good balance between Yuji and Gojo. He does everything in his power to avoid being a monster, but when it's the only choice he has, he won't hesitate. God, writing this video genuinely makes me love Yuta so much more, man. I desperately need Gege to write these stories ASAP. Anyway, those are the two main theories on how the Akotsu line came to be. Now it's time for an even crazier one. Now I want you to again focus on that first Zenin theory and how the Gojo and Zenin had a secret love affair that kicked off their conflict in the Edo period. In Jujutsu Kaisen, we only ever see one other story in the Edo period 400 years ago, and that was the flashback of Hajime Kashimo. Being someone who couldn't give two about Kashimo though, I'm actually going to focus on the way more mysterious part of that scene, which was kenjaku. Noritoshi Kamo, Kaori Itadori, and Suguru Geto are three hosts that we have seen kenjaku inhabit throughout history. However, the Kashimo flashback actually shows a form that we have never seen before and we aren't even given a name for. However, if one thing is for certain is that kenjaku does not take a body without having a very clear reason, and they will often also be hella strong too. In fact, Kashimo even says that he should have fought kenjaku for an actual challenge, implying that he was still hella strong. My crackpot theory for this body is that he actually inherited the child of the affair between the Gojo and Zenin clan in that time period. I mean, it would either be the child or the child's child or the child's child's child, because the Edo period was like 400 years long, so who knows. But the point is, I think this body may have actually been an Akotsu. I mean, look at them. Are you telling me you really don't see the resemblance here? My other theory was that he actually took the body of the 10 Shadows user who died, but I find that a little bit less cool. Overall though, I have no clue why he would do this or what it would mean for the story, but it was never the main focus of this video, so f it. While writing this video, I actually came across some pretty cool information about the meaning of Yuta Akotsu's name. Now, please do forgive me if I'm wrong, because I don't know Japanese, but I'm just saying what I've read. Yuta supposedly means one with many friends, which is obviously just very fitting. The real interesting one though is what the kanji of Akotsu can mean. I believe it's split into two different words with many different translations, but I'm going to show you the ones that I think are best. The first part can mean second, specifically meaning second in rank, and I should not have to explain any further than that why it's important. Although it can also mean second as in duplicate, which is like literally his whole curse technique. The other part also has many meanings, but the ones that I like are character, core, and body. And yeah, that basically means Akotsu's name can literally be taken as second body. Wow. Again, apologies if I f***ed it up and it actually just means soggy towel or some shit like that. Yuta Akotsu is back. The goal of this video is to cope and glaze so effectively that I literally will Yuta back into the story. I'm like the Takaba of Jujutsu Kaisen theory crafting. As long as I legitimately believe the nonsense that I'm spouting, I can literally force it into reality. Lots of you guys seem to enjoy my Sukuna and Yuji theory videos, but I have noticed a large increase in requests for me to do some more Yuta glazing, which made me realize how much of a letdown I have become. This channel's very existence is a result of my special grade Yuta glazing and its overwhelming intensity. So for the first time in a while, Sukuna is going to get put on the back burner and my main focus will once again be on the strongest sorcerer in the history of the world, Yuta Akotsu. Plus, Sukuna's story is now over since Miguel's about to beat him so hard he turns back into a finger. So let's get straight into why Yuta Akotsu is about to return with a brand new toy that will shake Sukuna to his core. Now, I still think Yuta has absolutely had the most impact since Gojo when fighting Sukuna, since he did achieve his goal of allowing Yuji to save Fushiguro. Plus, it's not Yuta's fault that Megumi wanted to sleep in, and despite that, he kept his cool and proceeded with the next stage of the plan, signaling Maki followed by a sprinkle of death. However, even the strongest Sukuna glazers sense that something is a little bit off here. Yuta's death was very rushed and he got no moment of real respect or impact, unlike Gojo, Kashimo, and Higuruma. The last time a character supposedly died so suddenly was Choso, and he returned like 4 chapters later. Yuta was also taken by Wee instantly, and he's the only one anyone has suggested could still make it when Maki says even if Akotsu survives, indicating that she believes it is actually a possibility. And remember, characters like Maki have more information on what's going on in Shoko's human reconstruction workshop than we do. There's also the arrival of Miguel, a character who only really has ties to Gojo and Yuta. If you don't think Miguel's purpose here is to make Yuta the ultimate Sukuna killing, walking, talking weapon, then you have clearly been reading Kukutsu Jaisen instead. Well, either that or you're mentally stable, and I very much doubt a JJK fan is capable of that. Anyway, Miguel is going to play a very key role in Yuta's return and the fight moving forward. And no, it is not random. It's actually been suggested that there has always been some mysterious influence from an overseas party, in addition to indications that the Six Eyes still have a very significant role to play. And the one who told us all about these important things was Tengen. In fact, Tengen gave us a load of information, which at the time seemed like insignificant context, but I'm now realizing that it is vital to the story and to many of our injured characters moving forward. So now I'm going to take you back to our post-Shibuya chat with Tengen in order to show you why Yuta and Miguel were always going to be important. Following the Shibuya incident right at the beginning of the Culling Games, Yuji Itadori, Megami Fushiguro, Maki Zenin, Yuki Tsukumo, Choso, and Yuta Okotsu all went to confront Tengen in the Tomb of the Star. The following chapters are basically just Tengen dumping a load of information and context on us that I feel wasn't appropriately appreciated at the time. It wasn't appreciated. I rarely see anyone talk about what Tengen told us, so I'm gonna take it upon myself to highlight the most important parts, and then use my innate technique to convert the information into special grade Yuta glaze. So there are two key things Tengen says that we're gonna focus on, one being the significance of the Six Eyes to Tengen and kenjaku, and the other being Tengen's subtle nods towards Miguel's background and Africa's potential significance in the story. So Tengen is a sorcerer with an immortality curse technique dating all the way back to the Nara era before the Heian era. Since Tengen knew kenjaku, and kenjaku is likely responsible for founding the Star religious group, it's likely that he also dated back to the Nara era too. Every 400 or so years, Tengen needs to merge with a special soul called a star plasma vessel in order to prevent evolution and protect the world from a big, angry Tengen monster or some other dangerous, mystical shit. Kenjaku, being the troll he is, simply wants to prevent the mergers and cause Tengen to evolve and lose control for simple shits and giggles. You know, as you do. Fucking psychopath. Anyway, Tengen continues to explain how themselves, the star plasma vessels, and the Six Eyes are all closely bound together by fate. The Six Eyes are a trait you are born with, and they can only ever be one user at a time, and they all come about whenever Tengen needs to merge with a star plasma vessel. The Six Eyes are also inherited by Gojo clan members, who are descendants of Sugawara Michizane, just like Yuta. Something I find interesting is whether previous Six Eyes users always have limitless. Obviously, limitless is the best to have the Six Eyes with, but I do wonder if any other techniques could be paired with it. I have seen things saying that there is always a Six Eyes user. A Six Eyes and limitless user, however, only appears around every 400 or so years. This would explain why Kenjaku said to have fought, killed, and sealed multiple Six Eyes users, since it only said that he faced Six Eyes users and not Six Eyes and limitless users. A Six Eye and limitless user is an even rarer but stronger threat, hence why Gojo is likely the strongest to ever use them, challenged only by Sugawara Michizane, who also had both and may actually contest Gojo. This isn't really important here, it's just more of a fun thing for you to think about, you know? This small amount of information is all we know about the nature of the Six Eyes, but what Tengen makes painfully obvious is that fate, or some other higher power, is influencing everything to do with the Six Eyes and Tengen's merger. Now, since there is a clear interference of a higher power, trying to claim that the Six Eyes can only ever be gained at birth is foolishly naive, especially given what Tengen says next. Tengen explains how Kenjaku has twice been defeated by users of the Six Eyes. After that, Kenjaku started killing both Six Eyes and Star Plasma Vessels as newborns, yet somehow they still appeared on the day of the merger. And that's it. That's the most that they elaborate on that absolutely game-changing bombshell. Somehow they appear when needed, even though Kenjaku killed those born with them due to the mysterious interference of this so-called power called fate. How anyone who has read this can genuinely claim that it's impossible for anyone to gain the Six Eyes unless you are born with them is completely beyond me. It is outright stated by Tengen that logic should be completely ignored here, since a higher power, otherwise known as fate, ensures that somehow a Six Eyes user always appears on the day of the merger. Now pair this with the fact that Gojo is dead, along with Yuta being related to Gojo and Sugawara Michizane. It makes the idea of Yuta somehow gaining the Six Eyes through fate entirely possible. He would then also be able to use a copied version of Limitless as effectively as Gojo, including Infinity, Red, and even Infinite Void as a domain expansion. Infinity in Red is possible because, like Gojo, Yuta is a Jujutsu genius who has mastered reverse curse technique, and Infinite Void because Yuta can make any copy technique his guaranteed hit. Not only is this suggested by Tengen's story to be completely possible, but it would also result in the awakening of Yuta as a Six Eyes Limitless user who massively surpasses the strength of both Gojo and Sugawara Michizane. And why is this, you ask? Well, my young and pathetically nerdy student? Well, my wonderful and eager viewers, it's because Yuta is already one of the strongest sorcerers of all time. It's the same concept as Kenjaku being blatantly stronger than Geto, despite Geto being hella strong due to him effectively being a massively improved version with techniques besides curse manipulation. Yuta has Rika, the Queen of Curses. He has a stockpile of special grade curse techniques, a complete domain, and a deep understanding for reverse curse technique. Combine this with his natural genius, the Six Eyes, and Limitless, and you are left with a sorcerer far more versatile than Satoru Gojo could ever be. Not to mention the fact that his 5-minute time limit only exists due to his own ability to hold the connection being limited. Unlike Hakari's 4 minutes, it's not set in stone, and it's very possible that the Six Eyes could help him either increase or totally remove the time limit on his connection to Rika. But admittedly, this idea is significantly less supported by evidence and more so me just speculating and making theories. Now, if my previous argument for why this is totally possible wasn't enough for you, then let me try a little bit harder. Being the absolutely massive brain guy that Kenjaku is, he started to seal rather than kill Six Eyes users in order to stop them from somehow popping back up on the day of the merger. This is so smart because there cannot be 2 Six Eyes users alive at the same time, and sealed people are still very much alive. The 2 key pieces of evidence supporting Yuta's upcoming awakening are the fact that 2 users can't coexist, and the Six Eyes always appear on the day of Tengen's merger. Gojo being dead remains one obstacle limiting Yuta's ability to gain the Six Eyes. The other is the fact that the current day in Jujutsu Kaisen is also likely to be the same day that Tengen undergoes some type of merger, since I see no scenario where either side backs off and reconvenes at a later date. I think it all gets concluded right here, right now. So if there were ever going to be perfect conditions to allow Yuta this awakening, it's right now. However, an obvious problem is that I think Sukuna cannot handle a fight harder than Gojo right now. Megami also still needs saving, and our other main character should really be the one to rival Sukuna. Well, don't worry, because I have a perfectly reasonable line of reasoning. Wait, no. Well, don't worry, because I have a perfectly justified line of reasoning for how all of this is still possible. I have always viewed Itadori as a sort of parallel of Sukuna, and Okotsu a parallel of Gojo. Okay, I don't know if parallel is actually the right word, but you get what I mean. Like, they're similar or closely linked or whatever, you get the point. Itadori's unbreakable soul rivals Sukuna's, and the 2 characters are very uniquely linked in that Sukuna deeply despises Yuji, which is probably the most he has ever given a shit about another character. Also, they legit look like they're related. Now, Yuta is always talked about as Gojo's successor as the strongest, something he would be if he gained Gojo's abilities, meaning that Yuta will be the one responsible for tying up the loose ends in Gojo's story. And those loose ends are probably not Sukuna, but Tengen, since it was Gojo and the Six Eyes that failed to ensure Tengen never became a threat to the world. So my theory is that the Yuji and Sukuna narrative will continue and eventually lead to the final threat of Tengen, which is where our co-main character and Gojo's successor will awaken and finish that story for good. Of course, the only downside to this theory, which a lot of people won't like, is that it does mean Gojo is probably going to stay dead. But honestly, I don't care. I think it's perfect the way he went out, and Yuta taking over his role is perfectly fine by me. It's also entirely possible that Yuta returns to help Yuji earlier on, but if he does, I doubt it will be with this broken ass power-up. Because I can't lie, I do not think current Sukuna would stand a chance against a limitless Six Eyes Yuta Okotsu. But it is Gege after all, so who knows. As for how Yuta is going to survive that world-dividing slash and return to the fight, I believe Miguel has helped in some way already before saving Wiwi and confronting Sukuna. In his yap session, Tengen keeps subtly mentioning a place overseas. They say that the front of the prison realm used by Kenjaku was originally found beyond his barriers overseas. He also mentions how Gojo possibly hid the inverted spear of heaven overseas. Since Japan is the only place that really has sorcerers due to how Tengen's barriers works, you do kind of have to wonder how things like prison realm ended up overseas. And the only overseas place, okay, I've said overseas too much, fuck. And the only place not in Japan, the only Okay, right, no, we're sticking with it. And the only overseas place we know to have an actual group of foreign sorcerers is where Miguel is from in Africa. We also know that Miguel is hella strong, because he did fight Gojo and come out of it completely unscathed. He was also trusted to train Yuta back up to the 2nd strongest special grade, all the way from being a grade 4. And Miguel's also strong simply because Gege says so. Maybe Miguel had the prison realm in Africa and then brought it over to give it to Geto, and that's how Kenjaku found it. The idea is, though, that Tengen's suggestion that there is some overseas involvement in the plot of Jujutsu Kaisen leads me to believe that Miguel and his clan are the overseas party that Tengen keeps talking about. Gojo probably recognized their significance and their strength, as well as any potential secrets they kept concerning Jujutsu, hence why he sent Yuta to train there. I definitely have more to say in regards to Miguel, but this is Yuta's video, so the only points that matter are the ones supporting Miguel's ties to Yuta. Since Miguel was Yuta's teacher, and only Yuta's, I see no reason for him to really get involved in this fight unless it is to directly help Yuta. That being said though, Miguel hella strong and will seriously surprise Sukuna as he buys sacrifice as much time as possible. As with anything JJK related, there is a lot of information here, and I always do my best to try and structure it as efficiently as possible. However, sometimes I get lost in the glaze, so I will end the video with a brief summary. Basically, fate ensures that there is always a 6 Eyes user present on the day of the merger. Gojo being dead and Yuta being related to Gojo allows for fate to work its beautiful magic and give Yuta Okkotsu the 6 Eyes. And we also know that Yuta is capable of copying the limitless technique, meaning he can have both. Now, Yuta may heal up and return to help fight Sukuna, but he will only have his 6 Eyes awakening once Tengen becomes the real problem. Having fulfilled Gojo's wish of surpassing him and not having to fight alone, Yuta will lead the battle against a whatever form of Tengen merger Gege cooks up and finally put Gojo's story to rest. I think Miguel also likely has a role to play in Yuta surviving the world-dividing slash and buying him some time against Sukuna. So in conclusion, Yuta has been successfully glazed for an entire video and I can sleep easy now. Curse Technique Reversal, an ability that literally only exists to make Gojo look even cooler and to save Kenjaku's ass from falling into a black hole. Now the sad part is that's not even a joke. Red and Gravity are genuinely the only reversal techniques we have ever seen. So in true Allons-Y fashion, I got tired of waiting for Gege to add more and just decided to create them myself. So I chose a handful of the most popular techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen and gave them all a totally balanced reversal technique. Now I gotta be honest with you guys, a lot of the time it feels like some of you read a totally different manga to me, so I want to very briefly explain what a reversal technique actually is. Don't worry if you're still a bit confused though, because it is an incredibly complicated concept to grasp. Basically, curse technique reversal is when you take your curse technique and then reverse it.
Well, no fucking shit.
As Gojo showed us in his backstory arc, you must learn RCT in order to unlock your reversal technique. Now, Gojo's reversal was a particularly complicated case where he reversed his pull to make it push, aka red. Yeah, like I said, it's very complex stuff, you know, so don't worry if it's a bit confusing and it all gets a bit too much, alright? I get it. Now, for the 99% of you guys who actually have brains, I'm sure you already know all of this and just want to see what I've cooked up for the remaining special grades. So without any further yap, let's get straight into revealing the best unseen reversal techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen. Okay, we're gonna start things off with my absolute GOAT Yuta Okkotsu. And yes, I am aware that I've been glazing Yuta a lot recently, but don't worry, I'm gonna keep this one nice and brief so we can move on to the really crazy ones like Hakari and Yuji. It's actually very simple. Yuta's curse technique is copy, so I decided that his curse technique reversal should obviously be paste. In fact, it actually functions very similarly to a certain My Hero villain whose name rhymes with, I don't know, Call for None. When Yuta begins his 5-minute connection to Rika, he will use her endless supply of cursed energy to reverse his copy technique. When using curse technique reversal, Yuta can actually paste one of his copied abilities onto his allies. An ally can only have one curse technique pasted on them at one time, although during that 5 minutes, Yuta can actually recall the pasted technique and replace it with a different one. Yuta can still use copy as normal, but he will not be able to use any techniques that he has pasted on his allies. He can also give multiple allies techniques, but again, each sorcerer will need to be given a different one. Once the 5 minutes ends, all of the pasted techniques are then returned to Rika's storage for use at another time. And yes, I am fully aware of how strong this ability is, hence why I imposed so many rules and restrictions. I mean, if it wasn't for those restrictions, then Yuta could just have 5 people walking around with Jacob's ladder, and if that was the case, then dear old Sukiwuki would be royally fucked. It is still unbelievably strong though, don't get me wrong. Like, he could just fully give Shrine to Jackpot Hakari for 5 minutes straight. Or even better, he could just give Yuji Charles's clairvoyance. I mean, imagine you have to fight the Black Flash demon Yuji Itadori, but he can also see into the future. I mean, he might as well have future sight observation haki. And on top of all of that, you'll have Yuta next to him screaming at you to throw it back, and then Hakari next to him chucking dismantles at you like it's nothing. Now, if you think Yuta's reversal technique was crazy, then you might not be ready for the next one, so make sure to lock in. Okay, next up, I am going to be explaining my genius idea for Hakari's curse technique reversal. Of course, Hakari needs to figure out how to use reverse curse technique in base before he can actually use curse technique reversal, but I am not going to let the fact that Hakari is a complete spanner ruin my video, so just please pretend that he can. Now, because Hakari's domain naturally comes with his curse technique, it should mean that his curse technique reversal can be easily applied to the domain. When using curse technique reversal, Hakari will expand his domain as normal, reversal, but instead of it being called Idle Death Gamble, it's gonna be called Idle Death Scammer. The rules are gonna be the exact same as normal, it is just a normal pachinko machine. However, this time the opponents in the domain are also forced to play. Now, because of Hakari's gambling nature, I made sure to keep the idea of having good and bad outcomes. Basically, both Hakari and his opponent will start spinning. If Hakari's opponent somehow lands a jackpot first, then they gain infinite cursed energy and immortality instead of Hakari. However, if Hakari gets a jackpot first, he still will not get his normal infinite cursed energy buff. Instead, his opponent will suffer the consequences and receive a ban on their cursed energy for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That means base Hakari has 4 minutes and 11 seconds to beat the crap out of a helpless, powerless cripple in order to win. And I think we can all agree Hakari is capable of that, even though he has not been doing too well recently. Obviously, this does sound completely broken, and that's because it is. Reversal techniques are incredibly rare and hard to gain, but they also are just stronger. I mean, Gojo's reversal red is literally 2 times the cursed energy output of blue, and blue one-shot Agito, so it's no joke. Despite how strong Idle Death Scammer is though, it does come with some serious risks. If Hakari does somehow lose, he will be stuck in base fighting an opponent with infinite cursed energy and healing. Now, obviously the house always wins, but a risk is a risk all the same. Also, if Hakari doesn't totally incapacitate or kill his opponent while their cursed energy is banned, then he may struggle once their cursed energy recovers, especially if they're a good RCT user like Arame. Not getting the infinite cursed energy and healing buff will mean that his domain causes him to burn out of his curse technique and will drain his base cursed energy, just like everybody else in the verse. So he has to be willing to kill if he chooses to use this technique. Right, next up we have Yuki Tsukumo. My idea for Yuki's reversal technique is called Exotic Rage, and unlike Hakari's, it's very simple. Well, I say very simple, what I actually mean is it starts very simple and then gets really whatever, do you know what, you're just gonna find out. Yuki's normal curse technique is called Star Rage, and it basically just allows her to add virtual mass to herself. Up to a certain point, this added mass does not actually affect her body in any way, meaning she can move normally and hit like a f***ing truck. In theory though, she could go past that limit anytime she wants, which turns her body into a solar system destroying black hole with infinite mass. So given all of this, how exactly would the reversal technique work? Well, if Star Rage allows Yuki to increase her mass, then it only makes sense for Exotic Rage to let her decrease her mass. See, I told you it was that simple.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, no, I lied. It's about to get a lot more complicated, so make sure you're paying attention. Using Exotic Rage, Yuki can actually lower her mass so far that it becomes negative. Exotic Rage's limit is also reversed, meaning that until a certain point, the reduced mass only affects her and not anything around her. However, once reaching a certain point, it would again start to affect herself and everything else, and that's when shit gets really scary. Before worrying about that though, I'm gonna expertly explain how Yuki would benefit from having negative mass, like the big brain physicist that I am. Now, something having negative mass is actually a scientific concept, but not something believed to actually exist. In theory though, matter with negative mass, aka exotic matter, is actually the key to light speed movement. I'm not even gonna try and explain why, but the science says it is, so just accept it. For coolness purposes, I'm also gonna say that having negative mass allows you to phase through objects. So when Yuki activates Curse Technique Reversal, she gains the ability to move at the speed of light and phase through obstacles. However, because it only affects her, it means that she also sacrifices all attack potency. It is for utility only. If you're having a hard time imagining what it would look like, just think of Admiral Kizaru's light fruit powers from One Piece. I imagine it would work pretty much the same way as that. It would definitely be useful for quick escapes and closing distances fast, but it definitely lacks offensive potential. Now, in theory, she could switch between decreasing and increasing mass in order to close distance and then deliver a devastating blow. However, this would probably drain her cursed energy and strain her brain if overused, because realistically, she just isn't built like Gojo and she doesn't have the 6 eyes. I do actually think having utility versus damage is very balanced and works very well with Star Rage. It becomes a lot less balanced though if she decreases her mass past the limit. The way scientists know exotic matter actually doesn't exist is because it would basically make all of the mass around it negative, meaning even a little bit of it would wipe out the entire universe instantly. So yeah, if she pushes past that limit to the point where it affects other things, then it would literally be a universe ender. Next up is everybody's favorite part-time main character, Yuji Itadori. For Yuji's curse technique reversal though, we will actually be looking at his blood blood manipulation and not shrine. And the reason for that is because we don't know the specific details of how shrine works normally, let alone reversed. Anyway, I actually have two ideas for what blood manipulation's reversal could be. One of them is completely broken, and the other one is completely broken, but not as much as the first one. I gave option 1 the very familiar name of idol transfiguration, aka soul manipulation. The idea is that blood is a form of bodily control, so the reverse should be soul control, especially in a universe like JJK where the soul and body are tied together. Unlike Mahito, Yuji would not be able to manipulate other people's souls, but he could make it so that he can't be damaged unless the attack targets his soul directly. Although let's be real, this is very unlikely and it's totally busted, so let's f it off completely and look at a different outcome. The other and way more likely option for blood manipulation's reversal is blood manipulation.
What?
Instead of manipulating your own blood though, you would be capable of manipulating other people's blood. It's effectively like bloodbending from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it is completely broken. Although it would definitely have to have limited use due to how much cursed energy it would take up. Honestly, with shrine and blood manipulation at his disposal, Yuji has so much potential. Yuji just needs to figure out what the fuck he's doing with them normally before worrying about reversing them. Okay, I'm actually gonna finish the video by quickly running through some honorable mentions that are cool but not detailed enough to make their own sections on. First off, there's Arame's curse technique reversal, which I like to call Icy Hot. Basically, they're gonna go full Todoroki and expel blue flames instead of their normal ice. Yorozu's curse technique reversal would obviously be called deconstruction as opposed to construction. Anything marked by Yorozu's curse energy can be deconstructed in any way she likes, and this works on objects and people, but good durability and cursed energy reinforcement will help prevent it. If she's up against a sorcerer like Miwa though, she could just straight up disintegrate her if she chose to. Now the main advantage of this is that the atomic structure of anything Yorozu deconstructs is now known to her, meaning that she can easily construct it in the future, because a lot of people forget that in order for Yorozu to construct something, she actually needs to know what its makeup is. Arame's curse technique reversal would be called solo accessible area because I'm getting tired now and that's the best I can think of. And in my laziness, I concluded that it would just give a nearby sorcerer a minus 40% debuff instead of buffing them. So basically she would start a dance battle with Sukuna, which would then reduce his output. And finally we have the curse technique reversal of Kashimo's mythic beast Amber. Now instead of dying when he runs out of cursed energy, he actually drops dead as soon as he activates the technique in order to spare everyone around him the pain of watching him fight. Alright, that's all the curse technique reversals I could think of that I thought were actually worth sharing. I know I joked about Gege not showing us any more reversal techniques, but I do actually believe more are on the way very soon. I think it's a real possibility that Yuta actually learns it from Gojo when they soul swap. Since Kenjaku is the only other person we have seen use curse technique reversal in the series, it may actually have something to do with how he transfers his curse techniques when he swaps bodies. By learning curse technique reversal from Gojo, it may have actually helped Yuta to do the same in order to carry copy across and potentially extend his 5 minutes. After nearly 3 whole weeks of straight chapter reviews, it's finally time to bang out a new crackpot theory video. And believe me, you will most definitely think that I've lost my mind after watching this incredibly ambitious theory. This is genuinely a theory about someone or something stronger than Sukuna. And no, it's not Gojo, Yuta, or Yuji. Hell, it's not even the merger curse. Although the merger would definitely obliterate Sukuna, but that's not the point. Anyway, I just really want to jump straight into this theory because it's one of my absolute favorites, so let's just do it. F the intro. Everyone gets so caught up discussing things like how Sukuna is gonna win or who can beat Sukuna that you haven't even realized what's been right in front of you the entire time. I'm gonna start my theory by asking you how binding vows are enforced. If you break a vow made with someone else, then there is supposedly terrible consequences. And although we're yet to see these consequences in action, you have to wonder what exactly is enforcing them. An even better example of this is asking how someone is born with a heavenly restriction like Maki and Toji. It clearly wasn't a conscious decision that they had a say in because they were born that way and just didn't get a choice. Yet it supposedly is a type of binding vow where you free yourself from cursed energy and gain incredible strength. So I want to know who or what decides that they should be born with a heavenly restriction and for what reason. These questions about binding vows and heavenly restriction are very important moving forward in this theory, so get your ass off TikTok and lock the f in for some crazy ass ideas coming right up. When you stop and recall all of the major events and plot points in JJK, you will realize that everything is insanely convenient, but not in an arse-pully way, since characters like Tengen actually do discuss the fact that many of these things are very conveniently linked together. together. And the word Tengen uses to explain these conveniences is fate. Now, fate is a word that is tossed around a lot in fiction, especially in anime, and it is very rarely taken literally. However, I do believe that in Jujutsu Kaisen's case, it should be taken a lot more literally than it normally would. So what I have done is carefully compile a list of key events, characters, and statements, and identified how this so-called fate very literally and deliberately links everything together. Simply put though, I believe there is an unseen higher power which has been pulling all of the strings of Jujutsu Kaisen for a very long time. And I believe that this higher power, or fate, is tied very heavily to cursed energy, since some people do forget that cursed energy is the true villain of Jujutsu Kaisen and not Sukuna. First, we have Tengen and Kenjaku, two very closely related characters from before the Heian era. Their origins and backstories are complete mysteries to us, but we do know that they probably have the most knowledge on cursed energy out of anyone in the whole verse. And no, that doesn't mean the most knowledge on Jujutsu, it just means the most knowledge on cursed energy as a whole. Tengen explains that themselves, the Six Eyes, and the Star Plasma Vessel are all very closely tied together by this so-called fate. Kenjaku basically decided he was bored and wanted to prevent Tengen from merging with the Star Plasma Vessel so that she would go all doolally and want to destroy the world or some shit like that. To be honest, I don't really understand it, but you get the point. Tengen, no merger, evolve, become world, become dangerous, everybody dies. Some shit like that, you know? However, a very mysterious trait called the Six Eyes is always there to ensure that a Star Plasma Vessel merges with Tengen in order to prevent Tengen's evolution. Now, Tengen needs this merger roughly every 500 years, and conveniently, a Six Eyes limitless user is also born every 400 to 500 years that we know of. Kenjaku even went out of his way to kill Six Eyes users and Star Plasma Vessels at birth, yet they both still appeared at the day of the merger. It's painfully obvious to me that this is no mere coincidence. It's clearly very deliberately and purposefully planned. Tengen calls it fate, but I believe a better description would be the influence of an unseen higher power. It could be a literal god, but it also could potentially be the manifestation of cursed energy itself, since cursed energy seems to be the very thing tying these events together. For over 1,000 years, Kenjaku fought, killed, and sealed many Six Eyes users and Star Plasma Vessels. Yet he still failed to break free from fate's plan since the merger always seemed to go ahead anyway. But one day, everything started to change all at once for a completely unknown reason. Satoru Gojo, the strongest Six Eyes limitless user since Sugawara Michizane, was assigned the job of ensuring Tengen's merger with the Star Plasma Vessel Riko Omanai. But this time was very different to every other merger, because for the first time ever, it was actually prevented. Toji Fushiguro, the one who left his kid behind, the one who somehow totally escaped the chains of cursed energy, managed to defeat Gojo and Geto and then kill the Star Plasma Vessel before it could merge. Tengen seems to suggest that Toji was only able to defy this higher power, or fate, because he had escaped from cursed energy completely. And in the manga, this is literally represented as Toji breaking out of chains, the same chains that are used to represent binding vows. You see, there are so many things like this that are very closely linked, yet still so mysterious and unknown to us. But all of these events and factors are not simply convenient coincidences. They are deliberate and planned by something that we cannot see but has been pulling the strings for a very long time. Something much more dangerous than any sorcerer, including Sukuna. But all of these coincidences don't just stop there. Tengen literally says, then along came a boy with curse manipulation and suddenly all of the pieces came together. Geto and his curse manipulation being introduced at the same time as Gojo and Toji and with the failed merger was absolutely no coincidence. Geto's curse manipulation is the only reason that Kenjaku was able to control Tengen and start his merger plan, because Tengen became more of a curse than a human following the failed merger. Again, these are not simply coincidences. There is something pulling the strings here that none of us can see. This higher power, or fate, is quite possibly cursed energy itself, since a huge part of Jujutsu Kaisen's story is about ridding cursed energy from the world. I mean, that is literally Geto and Yuki's whole motivation. It's the whole point of their characters, pretty much. And cursed energy is genuinely the main villain in Jujutsu Kaisen, not only because of the cursed spirits, but also because anyone who isn't Toji or Maki is bound by these invisible and unbreakable chains of fate. And that does include Ryomen Sukuna, aka the King of Curses. And now that Toji has been established as someone who broke free from cursed energy and fate, I can come back to that opening point of how do heavenly restrictions even happen? And this also begs the question of the Six Eyes and why fate keeps bringing this special feature back into the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. Exactly what role is Gojo meant to play if it wasn't ensuring a merger, since he definitely didn't manage to do that, and he eventually did beat Toji and grow up to be a very successful sorcerer still present in the story.
Are you sure about that?
Okay, maybe not present anymore, but actually, no, that's a lie. He is present. What are you guys talking about? He's very much present. You know he is. Oh, and let's not forget that all of this does effectively lead back to Kenjaku's merger plan, and I have a few ideas about the merger's significance in the story, although I'm gonna come back to that in a bit, since this video is about Sukuna getting f***ed. and not kenjaku. Sorry, kenjaku, I love you, but, you know, this is about Sukuna, so fuck off. On the topic of Sukuna, let's finally get him involved in this theory and show how there is something in the Jujutsu Kaisen universe that is most definitely more dangerous than he is. It's very clear to me that some form of higher power can and has been pulling the strings and influencing everything going on in Jujutsu Kaisen. In order to escape from fate, one must completely escape from cursed energy, something that both Toji and Maki have achieved. Sukuna, on the other hand, is famous for being the king of curses and having the highest amount of cursed energy out of anybody. So unless you have panda level intelligence, you should realize that having the most cursed energy makes you the exact opposite of having the least cursed energy. And therefore it makes sense that Sukuna is the one who is the most tightly bound by the chains of fate. Sure, Sukuna is definitely the strongest sorcerer in history, but ironically he is totally at the mercy of this higher power called fate. Fate and binding vows are both represented by chains, and Sukuna, being the king of curses, is heavily restrained by those chains, which convinces me that his ending will be him locked up inside of Yuji forever. It's a very fitting end for an incredibly evil being whose only desire is to satisfy their boredom. The amount of satisfaction it would bring me to just know that Sukuna has to sit there day after day tied up inside Yuji being bored out of his mind. It's amazing. Of course, there is also the possibility that this higher power is a literal god or a sentient manifestation of cursed energy which has total control over other beings with cursed energy. There could be an actual entity that enforces things like binding vows, creates heavenly restrictions, and influences the birth and appearance of things like the Six Eyes and Star Plasma Vessels. I think the best way to put this is to just say imagine that Sukuna is the father slash the dwarf in the flask, and that the higher power called fate is the truth from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Some will definitely call this idea dumb, but are you really gonna tell me that all of this mention of fate and all of those conveniences in the story like the Six Eyes, the Star Plasma Vessel, Toji and Geto are simply coincidences? No, there is no way. And if they were simply coincidences, Gege would not draw attention to this by making Tengen constantly talk about them. I think these are very obviously pieces of a much bigger picture. A picture so big it makes Sukuna look very small and insignificant, and a picture that makes Kenjaku and his merger a lot more significant, along with the idea of finally ridding the world of cursed energy, which is what I'm actually going to discuss now. Now, the merger is likely going to play a huge role in Jujutsu Kaisen moving forward. However, my opinion on what the merger's exact role is has changed a fair bit since realizing that some unknown higher power is actually influencing all these events. We have been led to believe that fate influenced everything until Toji broke the cycle by being freed of cursed energy. But what if that wasn't the case at all? Again, it comes back to the question of how does one be born with a heavenly restriction? I think it's entirely possible that when fate decided the time had come, it influenced the birth of Toji Zenin with a heavenly restriction and the birth of Suguru Geto with curse manipulation. It's no coincidence that all of these factors came into play all at the same time. And if fate did dictate the introduction of Toji and Geto, then it suggests that Kenjaku's merger plan is actually something that needs to happen. Even Tengen said that all of the pieces suddenly conveniently came together for Kenjaku, allowing his merger plan to work. So if the merger is going to serve a purpose beyond absolute destruction, then what exactly would that be? Well, to be honest, I don't know, but I do have multiple different ideas, and you guys can basically just go into the comments and tell me which one you like better. One idea could be that following Sukuna's defeat, Megami will actually use the merger curse to somehow remove cursed energy from the world and achieve Geto's true goal. Another idea is that Kenjaku and Tengen both could have known more about cursed energy and this so-called higher power than they actually let on, and the merger is a way to let it manifest, almost like a vessel. Or perhaps Sukuna and Yuji will serve as a vessel for the merger, which is definitely a more popular theory and one a little bit less related to this theory, although it's a great idea nonetheless, so I thought I'd just chuck it in there. My point is, the merger's purpose is still very much unknown, but it is clear that fate has ensured that it will happen for whatever reason. I don't want to overcomplicate the point of this theory, so don't worry too much about this next part, because it's totally batshit crazy and just hella stretchy, but I kind of like to throw those parts in, so just ignore it if you want to. Considering we know next to nothing about their origins, other than that they are both from well before the Heian era, it could be that Kenjaku, Tengen, or both of them have actually been the ones pulling the strings the whole time. They may know so many things we don't, and there could actually be some secret ulterior motive to the Tengen merger. And yes, I think it's totally justified to believe that Tengen was in on Kenjaku's plan the entire time. She kept unknown secrets from us and Yuki. She conveniently fumbled breaking Kenjaku's domain for Yuki. She also deliberately chose not to bother merging with another Star Plasma vessel and actually allowed herself to evolve into a curse. So either she's completely f***ed us all over, or she is just a monumental idiot. But again, that's not really the main point to this theory, so don't go thinking about it too hard. Okay, I realize this is a very different and out there theory compared to normal, but I really do believe it needs to be talked about more. My goal was not to convince you that there is a literal god or god of cursed energy which controls everything, although I do believe that is a genuine possibility. It was more about pointing out how this higher power that Tengen calls fate is clearly heavily influencing every part of Jujutsu Kaisen's story. When you connect the dots, you realize that everything is linked together in a huge web.
What?
Okay, that doesn't really make sense, but you get what I'm trying to say. It all links together a little bit more than everyone realizes. There is an external influence setting things up to achieve an end goal, and everyone with cursed energy, especially Sukuna, is bound by these unbreakable chains of fate. The only two people that we know of who have escaped these chains are Maki and Toji, because they have achieved Geto and Yuki's goal of completely escaping cursed energy. It's a bit like Eren and the Founding Titan influence events throughout their history in order to lead to a certain outcome. If this higher power has plans for Sukuna though, there is literally nothing he can do about it. The King of Curses is simply nothing compared to a literal god of curses. Now, this theory is kind of complicated and was very hard to write, but I did my best trying to emphasize the important points. I have no clue what the end goal is or where we're going from here, but I just wanted to draw attention to the often overlooked themes of fate, and how the biggest mystery is actually cursed energy itself, in addition to cursed energy being the real villain of Jujutsu Kaisen. I am 110% certain that the series will definitely end with successfully ridding the world of curses for good. But yeah, the whole point of this video is basically me just saying I think there is a higher power or a god that is controlling everything from behind the scenes, and it's about how pointing out that Sukuna has the most cursed energy and is the king of curses. So if anybody is going to be restrained by the chains of fate, which are very heavily tied to cursed energy, then it would be Ryomen Sukuna. It basically means his ending is pretty much set in stone and there is nothing he can do about it. So unless Sukuna whips out an anti-fate technique from the Heian era, I do not think there is any way he can possibly escape from his true destiny of being locked up inside Yuji for the rest of his life. With the amount of cursed energy he has and being titled the King of Curses, there is absolutely no way he can battle the chains of fate. I really hate Sukuna.
Really? Wow.
But he really is the strongest in history. A lot of you made fun of me for making a video before chapter 251 where I said that there's no way Maki is going to swoop down and end Sukuna. Well, joke's on you, because she didn't. Okay, she did. But it's Gege behind the wheel of this clown car manga, so his dear Sukiwuki is 10 billion% fine and dandy. I don't know how, probably through some means of more Megami abuse, but we're not here to talk about that today. What I want to talk about is what comes next, because Sukuna still has a game changer to reveal. However, it won't be much of a reveal since I, the strongest nerd in history, have already worked out exactly what Sukuna's technique is, and holy shit, it's broken as hell. No matter how much you hate Sukuna, there is no denying that he is the king of cooking. Because when he finally reveals this technique, our guys are gonna clock how badly they f***ed up. So without any more waffle, let's see what Ryomen Sukuna is truly capable of. One very important thing that chapter 251 told us is that Dismantle and Cleave are actually in fact part of Sukuna's innate technique. We also know this because the slashes are the guaranteed hit of his domain. So if Dismantle and Cleave are his actual technique, then what is the mysterious black box? While Sukuna takes the piss out of Jogo, he mentions that he won't do anything petty like explain his technique, right before opening the black box of arse pulls. This suggests that the box is actually his curse technique, yet so is Dismantle. So how does that work? Well, it's possible that Dismantle and Cleave are an application of his true technique, where he has made a binding vow to not require the Fuga chant to use them. It's also possible that the slashes are the reverse technique of his black box. In fact, I even once saw someone theorize that Dismantle is simply throwing a really compact black box. This would low-key make sense because we do know that Gojo has a weakness for boxes, but also no. To be honest, this theory video does not rely on knowing that the box and Dismantle are connected. All that matters is that we continue with the assumption that the black box is in some way Sukuna's actual innate technique. So now to talk about the real reason why you clicked onto this video. The reveal of Sukuna's black box technique. When rereading Jujutsu Kaisen for the 15th time this week, I finally managed to string some dots together and realize that we have already been told everything we need to know about Sukuna's true technique. For example, after staring at the word Fuga for 3 hours, wondering why I didn't know what the f this word meant, I finally clocked that it wasn't English. After another 30 minutes stressing that I don't know any Japanese, I remembered that Google Translate was a thing, which then told me that the word meant refinement, or at least the main definition was refinement. There were other words, but I thought this one was the most fitting. With this information, I started to realize that refinement was an amazing word to describe both Sukuna's character and his abilities. My theory is through means of refinement, Sukuna is able to transmute his cursed energy so it can have different properties. For example, making it sharp like a knife, hot like fire, cold like ice, or even into something like lightning. That's right, Sukuna is the Avatar. Okay, that was a joke. Please don't leave. You see, I say it's a joke, but now that I think of it, that isn't even a bad theory. Like, Gege literally gave him arrow tattoos all over his body, and he can kind of— Shut up! Okay, fine. I know I was going way off topic. Right, where were we?
Ah, yeah. Have you ever noticed how most of Sukuna's greatest weapons involve cursed energy being refined so it has a certain trait? We've seen him use Dismantle and Cleave constantly, and we've seen a form of fire ability 3 times in total. He also had a cursed tool called Kamatoke, which is basically Thor's hammer from Wish, and he had another cursed tool in the Heian era, which could probably earthbend or some shit. He also owns a mysterious ice-wielding femboy who adores him, and he tolerates them for some reason. Now all we need to do is connect the dots. Sukuna constantly wants to push himself to be the best possible Jujutsu sorcerer he can. He cuts absolutely no corners and even goes to means like destroying his own body to have extra arms, mouths, and eyes for optimized output and effectiveness. But why stop there? Sukuna also likes to carry at least 2 cursed tools around, and drag Arame around with him, and honestly it just seems like major overkill. But not to Sukuna. Now if you recall, no one can outright use multiple cursed techniques at once. So if Sukuna's technique did involve transmuting cursed energy, then he would likely not be able to use multiple types at once. Although, since it's his main technique that is converting it into cursed energy, I guess each type isn't actually a technique. So there is a possibility he could use multiple, but I think it would probably be very inefficient use of his resources. So part of my theory is that Kamatoke, the unknown cursed tool, and maybe even Arame are all extensions of Sukuna's technique. Having vessels, whether human or object, to hold applications of his technique can allow Sukuna to effortlessly utilize them all without wasting time performing the open chant and selecting one type. Also, don't be confused. Me theorizing that Arame is an extension of Sukuna's technique as some sort of vessel is a very stretchy part of this theory as well, and not really one you need to focus on if you don't want to. I think the rest of it is what's more important. Either way, the idea of extending all of his abilities into weapons so he can utilize them all at once sounds like a very Sukuna thing to do, because he does just love overkill. Now you're probably wondering what the hell this has to do with a black box. Either that or my waffling has lulled you to sleep, in which case wake up because this is important. Believe it or not, Sukuna is not the only character to talk about black boxes in Jujutsu Kaisen. Both Shoko Ieri and Kusakabe GPT have talked about the brain being a black box when it comes to understanding how curse techniques actually work. And believe it or not, what they actually refer to is a black box system, which I have recently learned is not a literal black box. A black box system is simply an unknown process which converts an input into an output. For example, you may run a line of code and receive an output or a result without actually understanding how the program achieved it. In Jujutsu Kaisen terms, your prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for curse techniques, has a black box system of its own. You provide an input, being cursed energy, and then the brain completes an unknown process, leaving you with a cursed technique, the output. So it is my belief that Sukuna's technique involves opening the black box in order to understand the processes involved in cursed technique creation. And this is very fitting since Sukuna's pursuit for Jujutsu knowledge is a massive part of his character. It makes sense that he would be able to gain secret knowledge that other people don't have access to. Let's just look at the fight with Jogo. At the end, he chanted Fuga and Open before mimicking Jogo's fire technique. I think it's literally as simple as him examining the process involved in the technique's creation and then refining his cursed energy to replicate it. In fact, the only thing about this idea I find doesn't quite add up is the fact that Sukuna actually used flames before this point in Jujutsu Kaisen. After using Malevolent Shrine on the finger bearer, it burst into flames, and in the anime these flames were purple. This either has something to do with the domain's attack, which we don't know about, or Sukuna healed out his burnt curse technique and used a flame ability he already had access to. But to be honest, that feels very unnecessary and complete overkill for this very fraudulent curse. Although to be fair, so was the domain expansion, and Sukuna does just enjoy overkill, so maybe he did, who knows. And I think it's a real possibility that Gege just didn't really know what he was doing at that point, and it's just an inconsistency. I also feel it's very necessary to distinguish this theory from Yuta's copy technique. Sukuna literally learns how they work and how to truly make them his own technique. It is not a copy ability. It's also my belief that he cannot learn and replicate the processes behind inherited techniques like Ten Shadows, since he literally needed to take over Megami's body in order to use them. If you think about it, it does make sense, since inherited techniques obviously have a genetic component, unlike techniques manifested by cursed spirits like Jogo. Now, I think this theory of knowledge and refinement holds perfectly well on its own. However, you are left with the question of how exactly does Sukuna peer into the black box systems of other people's brains? Well, if you're like me and want to dig a little deeper, then we're going to add even more to this theory, and I think this is a very interesting part. It's actually my favorite, and I think it makes perfect sense, although you don't have to listen to it. This theory holds perfectly well on its own, and you can just stop here. But if you want to learn a little bit more, then I really suggest watching this, and my next video, because it's going to cover this topic very strongly. And it's all about the soul. The soul is a very important theme in Jujutsu Kaisen. What with Mahito's idol transfiguration, Yuji's indomitable soul, and even his new ability to strike and potentially swap with the soul. Now, I am actually going to make a completely separate video about how Yuji acquired this ability very soon, but this is Sukuna's video, so we're going to focus on him. Yeah, that's right, I've adapted and become the very thing I swore to destroy, a Sukuna glazer. Okay, time to go jerk off to a ramen, I guess. Ryomen Sukuna obviously is aware of the soul and can protect it, since Mahito was unable to transfigure Yuji under Sukuna's own protection. And Sukuna seems to be surviving Yuji's soul strikes despite all soul attacks normally negating conventional durability. There's also a chance that Sukuna himself can damage the soul or alter its shape, since he did actually hurt Mahito. It's also never really questioned how back in the Heian era, Sukuna was able to change his body from that of a human to a four-armed, two-mouthed, four-eyed monster. No other sorcerers have even been seen to make so much as a minor deliberate change to their physiology in order to give them an advantage, and I feel like the likes of Kenjaku and Kashimo definitely would have. In fact, the only other character capable of outright changing their form is Mahito through the manipulation of his soul, because we know that the body forms around the soul, so if you change the shape of the soul, the body will change to match it, which is how Mahito transfigures humans, and himself. So when you think about these things and you actually ask these questions, you realize that it's maybe possible Sukuna has an idle transfiguration ability. Maybe back in the Heian era, Sukuna encountered the curse of humans that came before Mahito and learnt their technique, since we know that cursed spirits like Mahito are eventually reborn. Regardless of how he acquired this technique, however, it's strongly suggested that Sukuna is aware of and can at very least manipulate his own soul, which in turn allows him to change his body. A potential theory involving Sukuna's technique and the soul lies in his supposed ability to literally peer into or communicate with the soul of others. When Mahito first tried to transfigure Yuji Itadori, Sukuna and Mahito's souls conversed in Sukuna's own innate domain, and in the domain, Sukuna then attacked Mahito, which left lasting effects, meaning that he did actually damage his soul. Sukuna also conversed with Jogo to pay his respects after killing him, and he did the same with Kashimo. Now, one thing this suggests is that the soul actually can be sustained after death, at least for a short period of time, which is also supported by Geto momentarily fighting against Kenjaku in Shibuya train station. Strangely though, Sukuna was not at the airport after Gojo died, suggesting that the Six Eyes may somehow protect Gojo's soul from entry, or Sukuna didn't want to for some reason. It's been shown by Mahito and Kenjaku in the past that altering the shape of the soul to in turn alter the brain can allow full access to new curse techniques. So maybe Sukuna forces his way into other people's souls, learns of the brain's shape, and then alters his own to access the technique. And this is the idea I'm most interested in. I feel like it's been very overlooked how Sukuna just casually converses with other people's souls, as if he's literally forcing his way in. We also know that Yuji is supposedly meant to get Sukuna's technique, and if you ask me, it looks like his technique has been revealed and it has a lot to do with the soul. So if you reverse engineer the problem, looking at what Yuji's ability is should be able to tell you what Sukuna's ability involves. And I think it involves the soul, very heavily. So I really like this idea of Sukuna being able to force his way into other people's souls, examine its shape, and then alter his own in order to access their techniques. Since we know that the shape of the soul determines the shape of the body, which would then determine the shape of the brain, which would then determine the brain's features, and then those features determine what your cursed technique would be, because it's all to do with the prefrontal cortex and all other confusing shit like that. The point is, I feel like the way he peers into the black box system is by examining the shape of other people's souls, and then replicating it by manipulating his own soul, something we know he can probably do because he changed his body. That basically summarizes the video. I'm actually going to expand even further on this more soul-focused idea in my next video, but that video is going to heavily involve Yuji Itadori and stray slightly off today's topic. So if you're interested in discussing the significance of the soul to the likes of Sukuna and Yuji, then make sure to keep an eye out for that next upload. It's basically going to be very similar to this video, but talking about Yuji Itadori and his technique instead of Sukuna. I am 99% certain that Sukuna's curse technique will be properly explained in the upcoming chapters, so I figured now was a good time to throw my final thoughts on Sukuna's abilities out there. Remember though that this is just a theory video, so please do share your own thoughts and theories in the comments below. Ryomen Sukuna, the king of cooking, the strongest cook in history, has never experienced Black Flash. The great Aoi Todo once explained that in order to become a great cook, you must experience Black Flash. So from this moment on, I officially revoke Sukuna's chef license and have removed his rights to cook, until he experiences the sparks of black. This claim has actually already been confirmed by the oh-so-reliable source called my brain, and I genuinely think it is the best theory I have ever produced on Jujutsu Kaisen. But at the end of the day, it is just that, a theory. A very good one, but a theory. You know, in the same way Gojo being dead is just a theory. Shut up! This theory is also going to tie back into the current events of Jujutsu Kaisen. The theory is going to explore how Yuji already has a weapon which exploits one of Sukuna's weakness, and Yuta actually has the other weapon which exploits one of Sukuna's weaknesses. And one of those weaknesses is his lack of knowledge about Black Flash, something we know Yuji is very proficient at. Todo's first order of business upon adopting his new brother is to teach him how to perfectly channel cursed energy. Todo genuinely taught Itadori more in 5 minutes than Gojo or Nanami did combined across a whole month. Apparently, the difference between sorcerers who have and haven't experienced Black Flash is like the difference between heaven and earth. A Black Flash increases hit strength by the power of 2.5, and it also temporarily allows the user to enter the zone and flawlessly control their cursed energy. It causes ramp-ups in output and can even increase your chance of landing another Black Flash later on in the same fight. Itadori broke Nanami's record of 4 with 5 Black Flashes in a single day, and in fact many believe Itadori's curse technique has something to do with using Black Flash at will. I don't think this is the case, but there is definitely something going on there. Maybe Kenjaku made Itadori by receiving Black Flash backshots? We aren't here to talk about Yuji, however, we are here to talk about Sukuna, the strongest in history. Or should I say, soon-to-be ex-strongest in history.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to sound like Captain Obvious, but we have never seen Sukuna land or even acknowledge a Black Flash. And my brain, being the absolute powerhouse it is, decided that this means Sukuna has never once landed a Black Flash, and maybe never will. In order to explain why this is the case, all you need to do is look at all the times Black Flash has been used so far. When Yuta landed a Black Flash against Geto, he was putting his all into that fight to protect his friends. In fact, Yuta was so determined that he was prepared to outright kill Geto then and there. Geto was a highly experienced special grade sorcerer at the height of his power, and Yuta was only a few months into training, so Yuta was definitely the underdog in that fight. Similarly, Itadori also had only 1 month of training when facing special grade disaster curse Hanami. He was literally forced to fight Hanami alone by Todo until he landed his first Black Flash. He then landed 4 more Black Flashes later on in the same fight, and he did this fighting an opponent who was much stronger than him and also had hurt his friends. Itadori and Kugisaki both landed Black Flash against a special grade curse wound death painting thing. Fuck those names. Nobara definitely was going all out in that fight, stabbing herself repeatedly in order to beat the death womb curse thingies with their own techniques. Nanami has also set a record for 4 Black Flashes on the Night Parade of 100 Demons. And yes, it was broken by Itadori, but that record was held until that point by Nanami. And he landed them after stepping in to prevent any more young sorcerers' deaths happening right before his eyes, including Ino. Itadori and Todo both landed Black Flash against special grade disaster curse Mahito. And Mahito also landed several Black Flashes as he fought his natural enemy and came close to grasping his soul's true essence. The next time we see Black Flash in the series is from Gojo against Sukuna himself, followed by 3 more as he enters the zone. Awakened Gojo has never been challenged like this before. He is pulling out all the stops against an opponent who finally rivals or even exceeds his own strength, so it's no coincidence Gojo landed Black Flashes here and not anywhere else in the series. So what does all of this have to do with Sukuna not using Black Flash? Well, it's simple. In all of these instances of Black Flash use, the user has almost always been going all out and almost always fighting opponents that should be beyond them, or at least challenge them. I think Gojo was the most challenging fight Sukuna has ever won, and even then he didn't go all out. Strangely, he also never landed his own Black Flash. Gojo vs Sukuna was one of the most highly anticipated fights in anime or manga, and it did not disappoint. Both showed feats of incredible power, so it doesn't make sense to me that Gojo would be the only one to land a Black Flash in that fight. Granted, Sukuna did have a hard time landing anything, but that's just because he's shit. The point stands. If we were ever to see a fight where Sukuna uses Black Flash, it would be this one, but he didn't. And I think that means that Sukuna never has. If he never has to go all out to achieve an ideal, just like everyone else does, then he would never have the concentration needed for a Black Flash hit. On the complete other side of the spectrum though, we have Yuji Itadori who fights tooth and nail to see his ideals realized. He always puts his all in despite being less powerful than most opponents he fights. I said most, not all. Blacks. Sukuna actually recognized Yuji's soul's resilience and it caused him great annoyance. It's the fact Yuji always fights so hard that he lands Black Flashes, and the fact Sukuna never has to try that he has never landed any Black Flashes, and that may well spell his defeat. Even more evidence suggesting Sukuna has never landed Black Flash is his lack of acknowledgement for it. When Itadori was his vessel, he would have seen Yuji use Black Flash countless times, but he still considers him weak and annoying. It was also when Gojo started pulling out Black Flashes that Sukuna started shaking. Yes, Sukuna took many risks against Gojo to learn how to defeat Infinity, but that doesn't mean he was always going to win. Taking risks means exactly what it sounds like. You take risks.
Really? Wow.
So Sukuna probably didn't anticipate the risk that came with allowing Gojo to enter the fucking Black Flash zone. That's probably why Sukuna became genuinely scared here, because Gojo could win with the power Black Flash blessed him with. Since the power of Black Flash really turned the tables in Gojo's favor and had a significant impact on the other fights in the series, there should be no denying its usefulness. However, Sukuna refuses to acknowledge it and has never used it. From Todo's explanation of Black Flash, we know it allows for a sorcerer to gain an understanding of cursed energy way beyond anyone who has never experienced it before. So if Sukuna has never experienced it, he will not understand its worth and significance. Does that sound familiar to you? Sukuna knows of love, but he has never experienced it, and therefore underestimates its worth. The power of Black Flash and love are both things Sukuna lacks and underestimates, meaning they are also his 2 weaknesses. These 2 things also happen to be our protagonist duo's greatest weapons. Yuta Akotsu, the strongest sorcerer of today, is the embodiment of the power of love. Yuji Itadori and his indomitable soul is the embodiment of the power of Black Flash. Both of these characters are fighting Sukuna together, each wielding a weapon that exploits Sukuna's only weaknesses. Now tell me that is not poetic. Everything fits perfectly into place with this theory, and it may be the best theory I have ever produced. It just makes sense. Anyway, that is why I think Sukuna has never experienced Black Flash and why it will be important very soon. I know a few of you think Yuta's gonna get smoked in this fight against Sukuna, but most of you think Rika's gonna get smoked by him. Actually, they think he's gonna get eaten by him, which I know Gege said something about Sukuna eating an important character, but I don't really understand what he'd gain from that. However, I do think it's important to point out that even if Sukuna does kill Rika, that does not make Yuta useless. All of Rika's power originally came from Yuta. All that cursed energy came from him. Again, this is just a theory, but it's very possible that upon losing Rika, Yuta actually gains all of the power Rika stored and becomes completely unstoppable. I know there are also theories circulating about Yuta getting a 6-eye transplant, which I don't... Yeah, the point of this video is not to talk about whether Yuta can beat Sukuna or not. I've already made a video about that. It's about what advantage Yuta and Yuji have over Sukuna. Yuji's being his indomitable soul and the power of Black Flash, and Yuta being the power of love. Both of these things that Sukuna does not understand. And if you think of Yuta's weapon as being the power of love, then there is surely nothing that can drive him further to beating Sukuna than if Sukuna kills the person he loves. Based on what we've seen so far in Jujutsu Kaisen, I think it's very justified to say Sukuna is just going to cut them all down and win, no problem. But if you really look at it, Yuta and Yuji are the two that make the most sense to bring down Sukuna, obviously with the help of all of their friends. But in terms of actually exploiting his weaknesses and finding a way to beat him, it is both of these characters, the main character and the one intended to be the main character, that will be able to do it. I think that makes perfect sense.
Now trust me, I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, Allons, are you really making a Hakari video in 2024? Yes, I am making Hakari videos. But before you all rush to cancel me, please hear me out, because this specific Hakari video is an absolute banger for haters and glazers alike. Believe it or not, I am actually a big fan of Hakari. I don't relentlessly slander him because I hate him, I relentlessly slander him because he's a frustratingly massive waste of potential. I hate the fact that he is so cool and set up to be this super strong new gen sorcerer just for him to get turned into a complete bum that was literally sidelined from the entire story. So today I've decided to take matters into my own hands by proposing a selection of badass theories about Hakari's full potential. And yes, these theories do mainly focus on fixing Hakari's offensive abilities and his attack potency, because that's where he definitely fails. Bro is the literal definition of a punch kick merchant, but what's so pathetically funny about it is that Hakari has the weakest physical stats out of all of the heavy hitters. To be fair though, at least he can start throwing train doors at people when he starts losing. I mean, imagine Yuji's reaction when he pulls up to recruit a sorcerer said to be stronger than Yuta flipping a Kotsu, just to see that his special ability is strong train doors. Like, come on, Gege. Now remember that Gojo said Hakari had potential to be on par with him someday, yet he's been left in the dust by Yuta and Yuji. So I think it's finally time that I change that by finally revealing the Restless Gambler's full Gojo level potential. Before we dive into theory number 1 though, if we can get this video to over 1,000 likes, then I will finally drop a video settling one of the oldest debates in all of JJK, but I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet. Anyway, enough yap, let's just get right into the first theory. Okay, the first idea is a nice and easy one to get us started before we move on to the really juicy stuff, and that idea is to give Hakari a special grade curse tool to compensate for his Miwa level attack potency. I mean, just look at Maki. Without Soul Split Katana, she is objectively worse than Hakari because, like him, she would just be a punch kick merchant. Unlike Hakari though, she would be a punch kick merchant who can actually die, but with the Soul Split Katana, she becomes an unbelievably bigger threat, and I don't really see why it would be any different for Hakari, and honestly, the fact that nobody thought of this over the time skip just makes them all look like blithering idiots. You're telling me that Rika has a whole ass supply of cursed tools, and not at one point did Yuta think about sharing them. I mean, he has a whole ass scythe for fuck's sake, yet apparently Gege just put them there to make Rika look cooler because Yuta literally never ever uses them. Now let's just say for whatever reason that Rika doesn't like to share her toys and would swallow Hakari whole if he tried to take one. Fine, we can come up with a better situation. As an alternative, my fellow YouTuber Jaff Talks actually suggested a banger idea for Hakari's cursed tool. Imagine if over the time skip, Kashimo gave his lightning pole to Hakari as a sign of respect for being the only sorcerer to survive him in 400 years. Not only would it make Hakari completely broken, but it would also make the most sense for his character, since he and Kashimo do have a weird mutual respect thing going on. Hell, you guys know how much I hate Kashimo, but I would like him just that little bit more if he actually did this over that time skip. A blunt rod charged with electrical cursed energy could be exactly what Hakari needs in order to buff his attack potency. And honestly, I think part of the reason why Gege didn't do something like this is because he literally would have beaten Arame 20 chapters ago. Realistically, if Arame hasn't killed Hakari by now, then it likely means they simply can't do it. Sprinkle a little bit of Hakari cursed tool magic on there, and Arame gets absolutely folded. However, as realistic as this cursed tool idea is, it does feel like a bit of a cheat, and it really just doesn't interest me all that much. So let's move straight on to theory 2, which focuses more on Hakari's technique. So we know that Hakari gains infinite cursed energy, automatic RCT, and just higher cursed energy output in general when in jackpot. Now, when I first read Hakari's abilities, I thought he was super mega strong simply because it said infinite cursed energy, until I deeped it and then realized that it makes almost no difference because Hakari has got no big attack to actually use that infinite cursed energy on. The only real benefit of having infinite cursed energy is being able to sustain his automatic RCT, expand his domain over and over again, and it also means that his punch kick output increases by a tiny bit. And unfortunately for Hakari, punching a little bit harder will not let him climb anywhere near Yuta or Yuji's level, let alone Gojo's. So I came up with an idea for how Hakari's infinite cursed energy can be put to much better use when in jackpot. And the idea in question is cursed energy discharge, which means that Hakari can fire projectile blasts of pure cursed energy similar to those of Ryu and the Finger Bearers. As much as this would massively buff Hakari's attack potency and also give him some ranged attacks, I don't want it to be too similar to Ryu Ishiguri's Granite Blast because that would just be lazy writing. So in order to make this idea unique to Hakari, myself and Jaff came up with an idea that we like to call a Divergent Smash. Now, if you remember from early on in Jujutsu Kaisen, Divergent Fist is where a sorcerer punches their opponent and then slams their cursed energy into them after a delay, creating a sort of second impact. Divergent Smash, however, works slightly differently. Normally, a punch needs to make contact in order for you to slam your cursed energy into your opponent. In Hakari's case though, the sheer amount of cursed energy is so overwhelming that when Hakari punches, it actually sends the high output blast of serrated cursed energy flying out of his fist towards his opponent. Think of it almost like an Iron Man repulsor shot or Bakugo's explosions from My Hero. Now this right here is what we like to call Divergent Smash. And sure, you can argue that pure cursed energy still isn't strong enough to take down special grade sorcerers, as we saw when Yuta blocked Granite Blast with one hand. What's different for Hakari though is that his cursed energy has a special trait making it sharp, so it should definitely be a little bit more effective than just raw cursed energy, which is still insanely strong anyway. Now pair this new explosive application of his cursed energy with the fact that he is practically immortal, plus his strength in a domain clash, and you have yourself a version of Hakari many times stronger than he is now. Also, learning to discharge raw cursed energy is definitely something that can be learnt by pretty much any sorcerer, since we saw the likes of Yuta and Nanami do it. Even though Nanami's was a little bit on the smaller scale, it still happened. Now, to be completely honest with you guys, this third theory is probably my favorite, and it's also one which Gege has sort of already done, but I have chosen to make it even better. And it's all about luck. It's all about luck. As we saw from Hakari versus Kashimo, Hakari is outright stated to be crazy lucky, which is obviously a very good thing to have on your side when your entire curse technique is focused around gambling. The most obvious example of Hakari's luck is when he hit a 1 out of 239 chance jackpot on the first spin right as he was about to die. However, that isn't actually the only time that he got insanely lucky. Many people like to argue that Hakari would have eventually lost to base Kashimo if they didn't happen to be right next to the ocean, and I agree. However, I don't think something like this can be brushed off as plot armor or lazy writing. A really strong argument can be made for them both being by the sea, because being lucky is actually straight up part of Hakari's kit, which is kind of similar to Domino from Deadpool, I guess. There are many sorcerers like Haruta and Takaba who are completely unaware of the full extent of their own technique, and with Hakari being as brain dead as he is, it really wouldn't shock me to learn that he doesn't fully understand his either. I mean, how do you fully push the limit of such a complex technique? Finding the limit means that he dies, so it's literally not possible to do so. My point is basically that Gege has given Hakari plot armor that actually makes sense, because the true power of Hakari doesn't necessarily come from jackpot itself, but rather his insane luck. So you can't really make a valid argument out of Hakari losing to base Kashimo if not by the water, because they were arguably only by the water due to Hakari's kit involving being lucky. Make sense? Unfortunately though, we haven't had a chance to test this theory much due to Hakari's only other major fight being 90% off screen. Yeah, thanks a lot, Gege. And now they're not even fighting, they're just playing rock, paper, scissors while everyone else is fighting for their life. Like, come on. Now, I understand this theory doesn't directly increase Hakari's offensive abilities or his attack potency, but it does mean that those things become less important because he can actually win by other luck-related means. Anyway, moving on. Okay, before we move on to putting Hakari up against some popular opponents, experience with his new and improved abilities, there is one more theory that I want to quickly discuss. When first introduced to us, Gege revealed that Hakari's cursed energy had a sharp edge that made it feel as if you were getting hit by a serrated bat. Against Charles Burn fodder, Gege for some reason decided to then downgrade this to sandpaper cursed energy, which is way less cool than a serrated bat. And then it's literally never mentioned again, ever. And again, this is originally a really cool concept with some great potential, but for some reason Gege totally abandoned it, turning Hakari into the AP-less bum that he is today. Now, my fix for this was actually incredibly simple. I just made the whole sharp cursed energy thing way more broken. The idea is, when Hakari reinforces his attacks with cursed energy, he makes use of the trait by creating an invisible edge or blade running along his arms and legs. Now, I actually know that many of my viewers are big One Piece fans, so I'll use an example from One Piece in order to make it super simple to understand. Remember the Baroque Works agent, Mr. One, who had the dice fruit? Yeah, I imagine it would work a lot like that. Just invisible blades of cursed energy that help him literally dice up his opponent. I mean, I guess it would basically be like if he went and sellotaped a dismantle to his arm and then started brutally beating people's asses with that. Now, this idea is very self-explanatory, and I don't see any real reason for me to get that deep into it. But despite how simple it is, it would massively increase Hakari's attack potency to a very suitable level for his character. Okay, before we wrap up the video, I want to quickly discuss some popular matchups that the fans like to put Hakari in, and then have a look at how those fights go with his new abilities. And of course, the first fight that we've got to talk about is Hakari versus Arame, because duh. Now, I'm gonna keep it 100. If Arame had any means of killing Hakari, then he would already be dead. The reason this fight is getting dragged out so much is because Hakari has not got the AP, which is exactly the same situation as most other matchups Hakari faces. However, if Hakari had a special grade curse tool, Divergent Smash, or actual sharp curse energy, then Hakari would almost definitely have won by now. And I think the exact same scenario applies to the other popular matchup of Hakari versus Ryu Ishiguri. Now, not to downplay Ryu in any way, but I do not think Granite Blast is going to reduce Hakari to ashes, which is what it's probably going to take to actually kill him. With Ryu being as durable as current Yuta and Yuji though, there is no way that Hakari beats Ryu either. So again, it's a stalemate. However, with a boost in attack potency from pretty much any of the theories mentioned above, Hakari may actually be able to eventually wear Ryu down. Also, Ryu will almost definitely instinctively open his domain as soon as Hakari launches his. And sure, Ryu won't get burnt out of his curse technique after using his domain, but his output will fall, and it will massively help in wearing Ryu down. Realistically though, Ryu Ishiguri is just an incredibly tanky opponent who earned respect from Sukuna for it, so it's really no surprise that it would take a while. And then of course there is the OG matchup debate of Hakari versus Yuta, but like, come on now, you know, be serious here. You could give Hakari all 4 of these buffs at once and Yuta would still mid-diff him. And even the argument for luck is invalid because everybody knows that in anime, the power of love and friendship destroys luck any day of the week. Sorry, I admit that really wasn't necessary to talk about, but I'd spoken about Hakari for way too long now and felt the sudden urge to just glaze Yuta. My bad. All in all though, I actually had a really great time making this video, but to be honest, it kinda made me realize just how wasted Hakari really was, and then it pissed me off even more, so all for nothing, I guess. Yuji Itadori recently awakened his new shrine technique, and despite being amped by black flashes, it did absolutely nothing. I mean, even Yuji himself realized that shit was ass and went straight back to battering his deformed uncle with black flash punches. Instead of just sitting here and crying about how much Yuji needs to improve though, I decided it would be a better use of my time to theorize how Yuji will get strong enough to properly terrify Sukuna. However, while I was thinking up all of these half-baked copium-fueled theories, I accidentally stumbled across the best one yet. For ages, I have been agonizing over how Yuji will increase his output and get to Sukuna's level. But I now realize that Gege planted the answer right under our noses an entire 7 chapters ago. Not only will this theory explain how Yuji's shrine will soon hit as hard as Sukuna's, but it also makes the most sense for Yuji's character. And yes, I am well aware of the fact that you want me to shut the f up and actually tell you what the theory is, so I will. First though, I want to point out that we just hit 10k subscribers, which is honestly pathetic. I mean, how many millions of people read JJK and we only have 10,000? Pathetic. No, I'm kidding. Thank you guys so much. This genuinely means the world to me. Actually just made my year. Fine. Let's just get on with the theory then. One of Jujutsu Kaisen's most prevalent themes at the moment is all about becoming monsters. Arame explains to Hakari that modern sorcerers are weak because they won't abandon their humanity in order to seize their desires. And Sukuna also stresses a very similar point to both Jogo and Kashimo. To be honest though, I don't know why the fuck Arame is chatting about this shit when they're literally Sukuna's submissive chef. That's like Gordon Ramsay lecturing Conor McGregor on his technique or some shit. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, Yuta recently realized that
that they all needed to abandon their humanity in order to beat the strongest in history. Among other Gojo-related things, Yuta was basically saying that they need to fight fire with fire. The problem is though, Sukuna's mentality and strength combined is simply too overwhelming for any of them. Almost everyone who tries to adopt that monster mindset ends up getting put in the dirt because Sukuna's is just superior. Yuji Itadori, however, gets back up over and over and over again and gets a little bit stronger every single time. Yuji's unbreakable resolve genuinely pushes Sukuna to lose his composure, and this is because Yuji stubbornly refuses to abandon his humanity and become a monster, and for that reason Sukuna thought Yuji was exceptionally weak, which is why it frustrates him so much that he won't just stay down. To put it very simply, if Sukuna represents the peak of selfishness, then Yuji represents the peak of selflessness. Instead of claiming your own desires by carelessly harming others, Yuji selflessly protects others by taking on their share of suffering as his own. And it's this idea right here that plays such a big role in both this theory and Yuji's character. Ever since his grandfather told him to help others in chapter 1, Yuji Itadori has held tightly onto his humanity and morals, which of course isn't compatible with being a Jujutsu sorcerer. After being faced with that conflict for a very long time though, it seems that he has finally settled which approach he wants to take. Instead of seizing your ideals by allowing others to suffer, Yuji gets strong enough to seize them by taking on that suffering for himself. Throughout JJK, Yuji has brought suffering onto himself and selflessly mutilated himself in order to get strong enough to save others from harm. He agreed to the plan of eating all of Sukuna's fingers and then being executed because he genuinely believed it would save countless lives in the long run, or at least that's what Gojo told him. I know it didn't quite play out that way, but that's what he thought. He also agreed to eat the remaining Curse Room death paintings just to get strong enough to fight Sukuna, and based on this panel, it really didn't seem like he was too keen on that idea, but he did it anyway. And this selfless mindset is even reflected in the way that he fights. Just look at how many scars he is covered in compared to everyone else, and that's simply because he likes to fight up close and literally walks through the pain. One of the best examples of this is when Nobara outright says,
"And if it's just pain, Yuji Itadori will never stop!"
His scars and blood-red gauntlets physically represent Yuji selflessly suffering to get stronger so that other people don't have to. His unbreakable soul and the ability to firm the pain for himself is what lets him always get back up, and that really pisses Sukuna off. Yuji Itadori is the living proof that Sukuna's selfish mentality is not how you become the strongest, or at least it will be by the end of the story. Now I know what you guys are thinking. Wow, great analysis, Allons, but how the f*** is that a shrine theory? Well, don't worry, because it's finally time for me to explain how Yuji Itadori will push his shrine to Sukuna's level. Trust me though, everything I have just discussed is very important for this to properly work with Yuji's character. As we all know, Yuji can use Cleave, but due to his lack of experience, the low output makes it pretty much useless. Sukuna has years and years of experience at the top, so it doesn't really make sense for Yuji to reach that level only on his own in the next 10 minutes. The solution to this problem though has been right under our noses for quite a while now, or more accurately, it fell on Sukuna's nose in chapter 257. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I believe while Yuta is keeping Sukuna busy, Yuji will go and retrieve Nanami's 7-3 curse tool from the battlefield. The 7-3 tool hits crazy hard even in the hands of your average grade 1 sorcerer. Now imagine how stupidly hard it would hit in Yuji's hands. Not only that, but Nanami was the previous Black Flash record holder with that curse tool, so it makes sense for Yuji to continue the tradition and unleash a flurry of Black Flashes with that tool. As if that wasn't overkill enough though, we can actually take it a step further. Imagine Yuji uses the 7-3 tool to land a 7-3 Cleave Black Flash. With Yuji's insane strength, it should easily match or even surpass Sukuna's own Cleave. And what would be even cooler is if Yuji finally unwraps the blade, but that might just be a universe ender. To be clear, this is definitely possible since you can use your own curse technique and a curse tool imbued with a technique at the same time. And he should be able to use Cleave with it, because as long as he's making contact with the blade and the blade is making contact with Sukuna, then he can spread Cleave. Hell, maybe Yuji could even turn it into a 7-3 chainsaw by covering it in mini slashes just like Sukuna did against Yuta and Maki. As undeniably cool as that theory is though, I know lots of you will probably still be wondering what the f*** it's got to do with my selflessness yap session in the beginning of the video. Well, it's related because Yuji takes on the burden of other people's suffering and uses it to get stronger. I mean, think back to Shibuya. When faced with Mahito, Yuji remembers Nanami's death and then literally says he will take on his share of suffering. He then immediately proceeded to wallop Frikito with a Black Flash. Using Nanami's ratio curse tool to make his shrine stronger than Sukuna's would quite literally represent Yuji Yuji using Nanami's suffering to get stronger. It would almost be like Yuji is collecting a shrine of suffering in order to get stronger. You know, what with him utilizing Nanami's technique and Choso's piercing blood. Gege could then take it a step further and have Sukuna collect a load of abilities that he got from causing suffering. For example, he added the world-cutting slash to his arsenal from beating Gojo, and also could have taken Hiten and Kamatoke from his strongest opponents in the past. Actually, now that I think about it, he only had Kamatoke in the modern age because he got it from Yorozu, who he only wanted to fight because he wanted to kill Sumaki and cause Megami suffering. Yeah, honestly, this entire theory just sounds too good to be true, but it's definitely how I would do it if I were Gege. Now, if you, for some dumbass reason, don't like this theory, then allow me to present you with every other way Yuji could possibly get stronger, that we know of at least. First off, there is the matter of kenjaku and whether Yuji has actually achieved his true purpose yet. As much as people like to jump to conclusions and then call them facts, we still don't 100% know why Yuji needed to be the son of Sukuna's brother's soul. Damn bro, that family tree is so messed up. Anyway, we also don't know the details of how kenjaku even got the twin soul in the first place. Of course, kenjaku says that Yuji's purpose was to be the perfect vessel, which of course everyone took to mean Sukuna, but some people believe that Yuji's true purpose is actually to be a vessel for the merger. That way, he would quite literally take all of Japan's suffering in exchange for cursed energy and strength beyond Sukuna's. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this theory, but I won't rule it out as a possibility because kenjaku is a slippery bastard that I do not trust one bit. The other ways that I believe Yuji can get stronger quickly are a little more vague because they are based off the fact that we still have so many unanswered questions. For example, what was the true purpose of Yuji and Yuta's soul swap training? This swap was actually revealed to us as a sneaky comment hidden in another conversation, meaning it's not yet been fully explored but will likely become relevant very soon, especially since Yuta is back on the battlefield. There are many good theories already, for example, Yuji learning to heal others, but since we don't know for sure, it could play a role in the future power-up or hidden ability for Yuji. And another big question is what Yuji and the gang actually learned from reading Yuki's soul book. It's one of those frustrating cases where the characters have more information than we do, and it's just getting drip-fed to us for a very, very long time. I mean, it's a damn chunky book that we've seen like less than a page of, so there could easily be something in there which allows a power-up or new ability from Yuji. The biggest question mark for me, though, is the secret behind Yuji's talent for Black Flash. I was willing to accept it as just something he can do because he's him, but after seeing the flashback of Gojo explaining it, I have wondered if there might actually be something more behind Yuji's talent yet to be explained. There's also the matter of how the Black Flash amp actually works. First off, I think the 120% boost is temporary. I also think the amp does stack, but with diminishing returns, or else you would become way too strong, way too fast. The other benefit of Black Flash, though, is that it deepens your understanding and skill with curse energy. The more you land one, the better you get. I mean, when Yuji lands his flurry of Black Flashes, Sukuna even wonders if Yuji is trying to climb to his level, which suggests that there is at least some temporary or permanent increase in strength that comes with landing a load of Black Flashes. Since we still don't know exactly how they work, it remains an open-ended question mark, but I definitely see Yuji's talent for Black Flash being a way for him to reach Sukuna's level. Who knows, maybe he will go beyond a regular Black Flash and evolve it somehow. Maybe he'll pull a Mahito and grasp the true essence of his soul. Or maybe Yuji's skill with cursed energy will advance so high that he becomes the first sorcerer ever to utilize multiple techniques simultaneously. The possibilities are literally endless at this point. Who the fuck knows? Whenever I used to think about the strongest curse techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen, the first ones that always came to mind were Gojo's Limitless, Megami's 10 Shadows, Yuki's Star Rage, and hell, even Akotsu's Curse Spirit Riz technique. But one that never really crossed my mind until now is blood manipulation. In fact, when we first met Naruto Shikamo, I thought he was gonna be that guy, and obviously he was not that guy, so it kind of ruined my perception of the technique. However, since seeing Choso and Yuji in action, my respect for blood manipulation went up significantly. But it wasn't until I properly examine the history of the big three families and the big three vengeful spirits that I realized blood manipulation has the potential to be a top 5 technique. The only issue is, unlike Limitless and 10 Shadows, the true potential of blood manipulation is a complete mystery to us. So I decided to make this video theorizing all of the insane possibilities blood manipulation presents and how Yuji Itadori will be the one to achieve them. And this will include conversations about a full body blood armor and a potential domain expansion, among other things. Now, I don't want to spend ages recapping what we currently know about blood manipulation. If you don't know about things like piercing blood already, then maybe reading just isn't for you. Right, now that I've scared away all the idiots, let's get straight into the full potential of blood manipulation. As you all should know, there are 3 big powerful families in Jujutsu society running all the way back to the Heian era, and each of these families are actually descendants of one of the 3 big vengeful spirits of Japan, of which we know painfully little about because Gege refuses to give us a Heian era flashback. The Gojo clan are descendants of Sugawara Michizane, and they are the holders of the 6 Eyes and limitless technique. The Zenin clan are the holders of the immensely strong Ten Shadows Curse technique and descendants of another one of the vengeful spirits. And finally, there's the Kamo clan who hold the blood manipulation technique, and who could have guessed, they also descend from the final vengeful spirit. Now, we've seen Gojo show us the full potential of the limitless technique by making the likes of Sukuna cry for his mummy, and we've seen Sukuna use the full potential of Megami's Ten Shadows technique by using big old mummy Maharaga to defeat Satoru Gojo. It's also not the first time a 6-size limitless user has fallen to Maharaga. There has been a big conflict between the Gojo and Zenin clan through history, and that fight has definitely happened before. And finally, we have seen the famous Kamo family technique used to cut a Super Mario thwomp in half. Yeah, not really the same level, is it? Well, that's not because the technique is shit. It's just because we haven't seen someone on Sukuna or Gojo's level actually use it before. But that's not to say that there hasn't ever been someone or something capable of using blood manipulation to the same level Gojo or Sukuna could. After all, the inherited techniques of the big three families supposedly originated from each of the three vengeful spirits. And in the Heian era, the strength of these spirits was not only pretty even amongst themselves, but also comparable to Sukuna himself. In fact, like Sukuna, they were considered natural disasters above all else. I mean, when asked how Gojo compares to all previous 6-size limitless users, he said he was the strongest, but admitted that Sugawara Michizane would actually be a genuine challenge for him. Just eat that for a second, because it's not the kind of thing Gojo would say lightly. Anyway, my point is, back in the day, there was likely a vengeful spirit capable of using blood manipulation on a level where it could compete with Limitless and Ten Shadows. So that means there is a whole side to blood manipulation yet to be discovered by Itadori, and this recent awakening might have just unlocked its full Heian era potential. By the way, if you think I'm pulling this information out of my arse, then I highly recommend you go and read the JJK fanbook and the light novels. There is so much cool stuff in there, especially about the Heian era. So now that we have established blood manipulation has unseen potential near the level of Ten Shadows and Limitless, let's get right into what this full power actually could look like. The first possible application is actually a very popular theory already, and it does look like it might actually happen very soon in the story. And this potential new ability is a full body blood armor. We've seen Choso use a very basic version of this against Yuji, except I think Yuji will make it cover his entire body rather than just one section. I think Yuji's gauntlets are actually the first step to achieving this, since they do look like they were actually created with his own blood manipulation. It would also be so cool if he took inspiration from Mahito's true form armor. And yeah, I'm saying true form because I hate calling it the instant spirit body of disgustingly long titles and anime type bullshit. It would work really great with the whole I am you thing if Yuji lands his Black Flash, awakens the true essence of his soul, and then his gauntlets spread to cover his entire body just like Mahito. At Sukuna's current output, it would also make him pretty much dismantle proof. I do genuinely think this full body blood armor is the most fitting and likely new application of blood manipulation, at least in my opinion, although I don't think it is enough to put it on the same level as Ten Shadows or Limitless, so we're gonna keep going with some more ideas. Now, the next idea I had is definitely less likely, but it is still a genuinely realistic possibility, and it is bloodbending. Now, if you're a weirdo and you've never seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, then please kindly f*** off and unsubscribe. I'm kidding, please don't do that. I love you all. Stay, subscribe, like. Bloodbending is basically the ability to control your opponent like a puppet by manipulating their blood. And yes, it is most definitely as broken as it sounds, but that's kind of the whole point of the f***ing video. But because this defies an already established rule of only being able to control your own blood, I will add a condition. This is only possible if you manage to mix your blood into your opponent's bloodstream. Now, this genuinely should be possible, since anything that you mix your blood with or your blood comes into contact with can also be manipulated, as we've seen from the likes of Kamo's arrows and Gakuganji telling Kamo to mix his blood with the other blood in order to control both. If you remember, right after Yuta used Cleave on Sukuna's face, Yuji spat a crap ton of blood all over his wounds, and then he activated Supernova. But this could also have allowed Yuji to actually get his blood into Sukuna's body and potentially set up the possibility of bloodbending. I mean, imagine Yuji can now direct the blood away from Sukuna's brain, hence disrupting control over his curse technique and reverse curse technique, but obviously not by enough to kill him because of the whole we need to save Megami situation. Honestly, this possibility is definitely my favorite possible application of blood manipulation, and I do think it genuinely makes sense. Like, if you mix your blood into your opponent's blood and it's in their body, then you should really just be able to control them, right? Moving on though, Yuji is related to the Curse Womb Death paintings just like Choso. He also definitely ate the remaining Curse Womb Death paintings, so he should be able to access their collective cursed energy and techniques. Even without this factor though, we have seen Choso connect to his brothers and draw on their techniques as he utilized SO Choso's maximum winking against Kenny. I think it's pretty safe to assume, for both of these reasons, that Yuji should actually be able to draw on and utilize the abilities of the remaining death paintings. There are 6 remaining cursed wombs with unknown techniques, in addition to winking, corrosive blood, and decay. That's a hell of a lot of utility right there, and we have not seen either Yuji or Choso use any of these abilities against Sukuna so far, so I do feel like they're going to come into play slightly soon. Slightly soon? Does that make sense? Yeah, no, it does. Now, in my opinion, Yuji's output is currently way higher than Esso's or Kechizu's ever could be. I am still doubtful about how effective these abilities would actually be in the current fight, but it is a possibility nonetheless, and I do think some of them would come in handy. At least winking would definitely be very effective, because it just massively increases your mobility, and like, who the f would ever complain about that, you know? Now, something we actually know Itadori and Choso can do, but really don't do it enough, is weapon creation. Choso made daggers and rocket boots from blood, and I believe Yuji made those gauntlets. Construction is clearly possible for them, they just need to have better imaginations and actually do it. I mean, I guess the application of blood manipulation would be the same one needed for the body armor, but why stop there? Why not make a sword or some shit, you know? It's basically a much more cursed energy efficient version of Yorozu's construction curse technique, but limited to only blood as the substance. But as we know from Yorozu's technique, there is so much potential there, and I really hope Gege explores this more, because I found Choso's blood daggers so damn cool. There is so many opportunities for creating just amazing stuff like we saw from Yorozu, yet they're not doing it, and I don't understand why. I mean, I at least hope the blood armor will come soon. I don't think it should stop there, but I do think that is the main one I would like to see if they are going to use some sort of blood construction ability. Okay then, I quickly want to talk about resolving blood manipulation's biggest weakness before moving on to the reveal of my idea for a blood manipulation domain expansion. So obviously the biggest weakness is that it's blood, and obviously you kind of need your blood to, like, you know, live. Choso doesn't have this problem because he's part curse and has unlimited blood, but Yuji definitely does. And the way Yuji can overcome this problem is via his reverse curse technique in order to replenish his blood and basically just have an infinite pool of blood. Reverse curse technique is actually something Yuji can already do, and that already makes him stronger than blood manipulators like Kamo. The problem with this though is that reverse curse technique takes a crap ton of cursed energy. Although I do believe that Yuji currently has one of the biggest pools of cursed energy in the entire verse, maybe even competing with Yuta, although I don't think he's quite there yet. It's already been stated that he has some of Sukuna's cursed energy from being soaked in it for a very long time, and for the same reason he should now have all of the remaining Curse Womb Death Paintings cursed energy stored up. So yeah, for now, cursed energy should not be a problem for Yuji. However, I do want to point out the possibility that Yuji has not been using a conventional reverse curse technique at all, rather a method of healing via blood manipulation that he learnt from Choso. This would explain how both Choso and Yuji were capable of healing devastating stomach-destroying injuries that conventional RCT users would not have survived. After all, Sukuna just assumed that Yuji's recovery was due to conventional reverse curse technique, but what's to say that there isn't some alternative method that blood manipulators can use? It was also in this moment that Choso came to help him and explain the process in a much more blood-related way than we are used to. Some may think this is a bit stretchy, but to be honest, I would find it way cooler than a normal reverse curse technique. It would also resolve the problem of reverse curse technique being incredibly taxing on your cursed energy if you have a way to do it via your own blood. Alright then, it's finally time to move on to the highlight of the video. I have created what I think a blood manipulation domain expansion should be. Hell, I even gave it a name. So now may I present to you Domain Expansion Crimson Horror. Yeah, the name is totally not a reference to the Doctor Who episode called Crimson Horror, but still, I found it very fitting and I like it, so it's gonna stay that way. Now, I really cannot draw or animate for shit, so I'm just gonna have to explain this to you and you're just gonna have to sit there and imagine it looking really cool. It will definitely look similar to Chimero Shadow Garden by being an endless pool of blood that the opponent is just slammed into. I actually had 2 ideas for the guaranteed hit, so I'll tell you both of them and you can let me know which you preferred in the comments below. Option 1 is a more conventional option of just simply applying any normal application of blood manipulation as the guaranteed hit, such as piercing blood. It's a very simple yet effective way of doing it because the guaranteed hit of piercing blood is definitely no joke and it would be devastating for a lot of opponents. Option 2, however, is a little bit more exciting. Basic applications of blood manipulation, like piercing blood, can still be used freely in the domain, but they aren't the guaranteed hit. Similar to how Yuta can use his swords, but they are not the guaranteed hit of his domain. Instead, the guaranteed hit will involve an application of decay and poison. By standing in the domain's pool of blood, the opponent's cursed energy and output is slowly drained away from their body. This will make it harder for them to fight back against normal blood manipulation attacks and weaken their own control over their curse technique. Being a more complex guaranteed hit, it would also make it immune from the likes of
a falling blossom emotion, which is just a really nice added bonus. Option 2's life drain is definitely my preferred guaranteed hit, but be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you have your own idea for what it could be, then definitely put that in there too. Now, when I look back on some of these possibilities, especially the bloodbending, I can definitely see why blood manipulation has been held in such high regard throughout history. Out of all of them, the full body blood armor seems the most likely to happen, and if Yuji does take inspiration from Mahito's armor, then that genuinely is nothing short of peak writing. To be honest, I still think 10 Shadows and Limitless are stronger, but blood manipulation can definitely be put up there with some of the strongest techniques in the entire JJK verse. Also, don't forget that these are just theories and ideas. I'm sure Gege can find loads of other ways to deliver on the hype of blood manipulation, and I think if anyone is going to show us its full potential, it should definitely be Yuji Itadori.